Chapter 852. In addition to middle school students, there would also be high school students participating in the competition this time. However, Yunjian had already heard from her homeroom teacher that middle school students would only compete with middle school students, and high school students would only compete with high school students. The two schools had nothing to do with each other. Even the foreign language competition venue was not in the same place. Yunjian was a day student, so she would go home every day. She guessed that her brother Yun-yi would definitely come to an event like today's. As Yun-yi was a boarding student, Yunjian had not seen Yun-yi from the weekend until Wednesday, so she did not have the chance to ask if he would be participating in the competition today. Moreover, the foreign language competition venue was not the same for middle school and high school, so Yunjian did not know if she would meet Yun-yi today. When they arrived at their destination, the female teacher who was in charge of the order said, "We're here. Students, get off the bus in an orderly manner. Don't rush when you get off the bus. Walk slowly one by one. Don't push or squeeze." The bus sent the students directly to the entrance of Foreign Languages High School. Looking at the huge signboard at the entrance of Foreign Languages High School, the students realized that they had arrived at the entrance of Foreign Languages High School. Right in front of them was a huge floor-to-ceiling signboard with 4 large stone words carved on it. Foreign Languages High School. "Students, follow me. You don't have to line up." The female teacher who was in charge of the order was standing below the bus. She was arranging things in an orderly manner. Only 3 students from Yunjian's class were participating in the foreign language competition today. Other than Yunjian, the other 2 students were girls. Moreover, the 2 girls were close to each other, and they did not usually greet or socialize with Yunjian. Therefore, after Yunjian got off the bus, she stood there alone. The people around her were all in groups. Students of this age rarely walked alone when they went out for competitions. Some students even thought that it was embarrassing to walk alone, as if they didn't have any friends. However, this situation did not happen to Yunjian at all. Yunjian had an excellent temperament. Even if she stood there silently, she would attract the attention of the people around her. At this moment, Yunjian had her hands in her trouser pockets. She stood there lazily with her thumbs hooked on the sides of her trouser pockets. Right now, the morning sun was shining on Yunjian at a slanted angle. No matter how one looked at it, Yunjian was like a beauty bathing in the sun. However, at this moment, Yunjian carried a trace of unapproachable aura, which made everyone present unconsciously blink. After the female teacher did a head count, she led everyone into Foreign Languages High School and headed straight for the competition venue, the junior high school. Yunjian followed the group all the way forward. When they arrived at the competition venue, everyone was stunned by the lineup in front of them. The people standing in front of him could be considered as a sea of people. After all the students from junior high schools in Longmen City who were proficient in English were gathered here. Of course, this was only limited to junior high school students. As for the senior high school students, it was on the other end. Yunjian planned to go to the senior high school venue after her competition to see if she could find Yun-yi. Just as Yunjian thought about it, a surprised female voice came from her left. "Hey, it's you. Are you here for the competition too?" Yunjian's eyelid twitched at the voice and she turned to look. Chapter 853. Yunjian was slightly surprised when she saw Ning Lanlan. After all, Ning Lanlan had come to borrow some salt when they barbecued by Nilong River previously. That was just a chance encounter in their journey. It was rare to have a chance encounter like this in one's life. There were many people one could meet in one's life, but most of them were just passers-by. Most of them would never meet again. Therefore, Yunjian was slightly taken aback when she saw Ning Lanlan. Yunjian calmed down after her initial shock. "What a coincidence," Yunjian replied with a faint smile since she did not have a bad impression of Ning Lanlan. "Are you here for the competition alone too?" Ning Lanlan asked in delight when she saw that Yunjian did not have any friends with her. Yunjian nodded. Ning Lanlan was obviously here for the foreign language competition alone. Girls usually like to travel in groups, so did Ning Lanlan. Therefore, when Ning Lanlan heard that Yunjian was here alone, she was delighted. Since Yunjian did not have a companion, she could walk with Yunjian naturally. "Right, I haven't asked you for your name before." Ning Lanlan suddenly thought of this. Moreover, she was a straightforward person, so she spoke up immediately. "Yunjian," Yunjian answered with a nod. "Yunjian." Ning Lanlan repeated and looked at Yunjian, speaking to Yunjian in an envious tone. "Yunjian, your name is so nice. Can I call you Jianjian?" Yunjian raised her brow when she heard Ning Lanlan call her Jianjian. She was instantly reminded of Qin Sini. Qin Sini called her Jianjian too. "Sure, Yun Jian replied softly to Ning Lanlan. Ning Lanlan nodded excitedly. After getting to know Ning Lanlan stood beside Yun Jian. Ning Lanlan only left Yun Jian's side reluctantly when the competition was about to begin. Jian, I'll go gather first. I'll look for you when the competition is over. Ning Lanlan chatted with Yun Jian for a while and realized that she and Yun Jian hit it off very well. Therefore, Ning Lanlan did not forget to call out to Yun Jian when she was about to head to the gathering point. Yun Jian also found Ning Lanlan quite interesting. She had a good impression of Ning Lanlan at first. Now that she heard Ning Lanlan's words, she smiled faintly and nodded at Ning Lanlan. After Ning Lanlan left, Yun Jian and the others gathered immediately. I heard that there will be a foreign student coming over to be the judge later. So, everyone do your best. We don't need to get first place. Our school just needs to get second place. The female teacher stood in front of everyone and said. This was preaching before the competition. The reason why the female teacher said that they did not need to get first place and that they only needed to get second place was because there was foreign languages high school above them. Foreign languages high school's forte was foreign languages and their teachers were all hired from overseas, so they spoke authentic English. That was why the female teacher said what she said. After all, foreign languages high school had always won first place in foreign language competitions over the years. Look, isn't that guy a foreign student? He's the one who's going to be our judge later. One of the students suddenly saw a tall and sturdy boy walking towards them from afar. What was different was that the boy's skin was fair. In addition to his unique appearance, it was obvious that he was a foreigner. Yun Jian turned to look and could not help squinting when she saw who it was. It was not for anything else but the boy. He was the one who provoked Yun Jian when she went abroad to study at Yana High School for a week back then. Chapter 854. Lawson's full name was Charlie Lawson. At that moment, Lawson was being led into the invigilator's venue by a teacher. The students who came to participate in the competition were stunned. Firstly, most of them had never seen a foreigner before. Hence, they could not help but take a few more glances at Lawson when they saw him. Secondly, Lawson's looks were considered handsome among the foreigners. Hence, some of the girls present were slightly stunned. Yun Jian pursed her lips. She did not expect to meet Lawson here. Lawson had already been led into the invigilator's venue by the teacher. However, just as Lawson walked into the venue, his eyes had already caught sight of Yun Jian before he even stepped into the venue. He was ecstatic when he snapped out of his daze. Yun Jian. Lawson saw Yun Jian and walked over in surprise. He called out Yun Jian's name in glib British Mandarin. The Chinese name was not changed when it was translated into English. The only difference was that it was changed to pinyin. Hence, everyone present could hear who Lawson was calling out to. However, in the next second, Lawson had already abandoned the teacher who led him and ran towards Yun Jian. Seeing this, the surrounding students, including those from Longmen First High School and those from other schools, were all shocked. This foreign student knew a student from Country Z? Just as everyone was thinking about this, Lawson had already run in front of Yun Jian. When he saw Yun Jian, Lawson waved his English that most of the people present could not understand. He said to Yun Jian, I knew you would come. I came all the way from school to find you. Yun Jian, I want to compete with you again. The English spoken by the people from Country Z was slightly different from the English spoken by the foreigners. Moreover, Lawson spoke very fluently. Most of the people present were fluent in English, but they could only understand the gist of what Lawson was saying. Some of them could only speak simple English, so they could not understand what Lawson was saying in English. At this moment, everyone present was thinking about one thing. Among the junior high school students, even Ji Shuatong, who was known as the foreign language genius from the foreign languages high school, would have a hard time talking to foreigners, right? Who was Ji Shuatong? Ji Shuatong was a junior high student of foreign languages high school. Everyone knew that Ji Shuatong was a foreign language genius. The reason why she was called a foreign languages prodigy was because she had been learning foreign languages since she was a child. However, the most shocking thing was that this girl named Ji Shuatong was only 16 years old, but she was already learning 3 foreign languages. English was Ji Shuatong's strength. How could someone like Ji Shuatong, who was publicly acknowledged as a foreign languages prodigy, not be present at such a big event? At this moment, a young girl with a tall and slender figure was standing not far away. This young girl was quite pretty. She had the typical big eyes and small lips, but at this moment she raised her head and looked down on others. This young girl was Ji Shuatong, who was known as the foreign languages prodigy. At this moment, there was a girl standing beside her. The girl was asking her, Shuatong, what did that foreigner say to that girl over there? Being questioned by this girl, Ji Shuatang put on an arrogant look. What else can he ask? Can't you understand such simple English? As she spoke, Ji Shuatang raised her peacock-like head even more arrogantly. Her tone was full of disdain for the girl beside her. Chapter 855. Ji Shuatang could not help but think proudly. She could easily communicate with a foreigner like Lawson in proper English. Even she, who was widely acknowledged as a foreign languages prodigy, could not do it. Could the girl standing over there have the ability to do it? She did not believe it. If Yun Jian could communicate with foreigners so easily, then her title of foreign languages prodigy would be hers. Although the girl standing beside Ji Shuatang was unhappy with Ji Shuatang's tone, she still tried to flatter Ji Shuatang. Of course I don't understand, but it's fine as long as our Shuatang understands. Shuatang, you're so good. It must be easy for you to talk to foreigners over there, right? Ji Shuatang forced a smile. That's, of course. Although she was good, she was not at the stage where she could talk to foreigners. She could talk normally, but if it was a deep conversation she could not do it. Even so, Ji Shuatang was very confident that Yun Jian could not talk to Lawson. After all, even a foreign languages prodigy like her, who had been learning English since young, could not do it. How could that girl have the ability to communicate with foreigners? Don't tease me. I don't believe it. Just as Ji Shuatang crossed her arms and looked at Yun Jian and Lawson arrogantly like a white swan, she heard Yun Jian's lips curl. She pursed her lips lightly and then spoke in fluent English. Another round? What? Yun Jian's fluent English and her exquisite accent stunned everyone present. There was a difference between the English spoken by foreigners and the English spoken by Country Z's people. However, Yun Jian's fluent English just now made some of Country Z's own English teachers concede defeat. With that kind of intonation and accent, could this girl have lived abroad for a long time? However, the people present immediately abandoned this thought. After all, Yun Jian was just a schoolmate who came here to participate in the competition. At this moment, the group of people standing beside Yun Jian were also stunned. Lawson was already having a pleasant conversation with Yun Jian. The two of them had been conversing in English. They spoke so fast that everyone present was confused. Some people couldn't understand at all, while others could understand a sentence or two. What is it? Yun Jian, you decide. I'm fine with anything. Lawson said seriously. From the looks of it, he was not going to let go until he defeated Yun Jian. I refuse. Yun Jian continued to speak. Then she glanced at Lawson from the corner of her eyes and could not help but remind him, what's more, it's our foreign language competition now. You're the judge. If we compete with you, what about our foreign language competition? Lawson knocked his head hard when he heard Yun Jian's reminder. Damn it. I forgot that I'm the referee now. Lawson shouted. How could he forget that? Yun Jian rolled her eyes at Lawson. From afar, Ji Shuatang saw that Yun Jian and Lawson's fluent English conversation had attracted everyone's attention and envious gazes. She could not help but grit her teeth. This kind of attention and envious gazes could only belong to her. Coincidentally, the girl standing beside Ji Shuatang could not help but exclaim, "Oh my God, she's so good. She can communicate so smoothly with foreigners. I feel like she's even better than you, Shuatang." The girl suddenly realized that she had said something wrong and quickly covered her mouth. However, to the competitive Ji Shuatang, the girl's words and actions were like needles pricking her ears. Ji Shuatang could not help but bite her lips hard. Chapter 856. With so many people staring at her, Yun Jian naturally could not sense that she was being watched. At that moment, Yun Jian was standing in front of Lawson, urging him to return to his referee's area. Lawson wanted to say more to Yun Jian, but he was urged by the teacher who led the team just now when the words were on the tip of his tongue. In the end, Lawson could only look at Yun Jian. As he walked away, he could not help but stop and shout at Yun Jian, "Yun Jian, you must wait for me after the competition ends. It's rare for me to come to Country Z. You must bring me around. You must." Yun Jian pursed her lips slightly. Her delicate face was delicate and intriguing. Okay. Yun Jian nodded lightly. Then Lawson ran back to where he was supposed to be as a referee. Seeing that the show was over, the students who had formed a circle around the competition also left. The foreign language competition soon began. There were more participants in the competition this time. Before the teachers led the students from their respective schools to the competition venue, they had already arranged each student's group. At that moment, all the students present had been arranged into 4 groups. A, B, C, and D. Class A students were compared to Class A students. It was the same for all the other groups. Class A students were undoubtedly the ones with the best academic results in each school. They started with A's. Once they reached grade D, they would be the students with the worst oral English skills in the school. These groups were arranged by professional English teachers who went to each school to test the students participating in the competition a few days ago. Yunjian's oral English was naturally Class A, so she was placed in Group A. The purpose of this grouping was to speed up the competition. After all, there were more participants. After the order was out, the first group to compete was the Class A. Yunjian was already standing in Group A's queue. She did not see Ning Lanlan, so she guessed that Ning Lanlan was probably not a student in Group A. As for the competition venue, it was the Big Field of Foreign Languages Middle School. The oral English competition was not a closed competition. During the competition, all the participating students could gather around and watch, but they were not allowed to make a sound. At this time, the students in Group A had already started their competition. The competition was divided into 2 rounds. The first round was to read English. The first round of the competition was very simple. All the contestants had to do was take an English dialogue sheet and read it from beginning to end. Then the referees would give each student a score based on their level. Yunjian's spoken English was very good, and everyone present had already heard it. Therefore, when Yunjian read out the long conversation smoothly, the people present did not feel the initial shock. With Yunjian as a comparison, Ji Shuatong, who was known as the foreign language prodigy, did not stand out as much. As a result, Ji Shuatong hated Yunjian even more. In the second round of the competition, all the members of Group A would stand together and each of them would choose an opponent for a foreign language exchange battle. The 2 of them would communicate in a foreign language until the other party could no longer speak a foreign language, which meant that they had won. The winner could choose the next opponent, and the loser would fight the loser. The winner could rise all the way to the top. The final 2 winners would fight to determine the first, second, and third place. When the students in Group A chose their opponents, the people around them were very nervous. The 2 people who received the most attention were Ji Shuatong, who was known as the foreign language prodigy, and Yunjian, who could easily converse with foreigners. Chapter 857. Was it that simple and crude? Were the 2 most favored contestants going up against each other right from the start? One had to know that in this round of competition, if she lost to her first opponent, then her ranking would be very low no matter what. It was the same as drawing lots to decide the winner. Only by defeating one's opponent could she continue to challenge other winners. If she couldn't even win the first round, her ranking would definitely not be high. Hence, when Ji Shuatong arrogantly pointed her finger at Yunjian and said that she would choose Yunjian, the crowd went wild. Foreign languages prodigy Ji Shuatong versus Yunjian, who could easily communicate with foreigners. This was undoubtedly the battle that everyone present was looking forward to. Both of them were very good at speaking. Hence, there was a lot of discussion in the crowd. Does it have to be so exciting? The 2 best contestants are going up against each other right from the start. Who do you think will win? Someone whispered to the people around them. Although the rules stated that no one was allowed to speak, mouths belonged to humans. The teachers naturally couldn't seal the mouths of all the students. Ji Shuatong is Foreign Languages High School's foreign languages prodigy. She was invited to participate in a competition overseas by herself. I heard that she even won the 3rd prize. I think she'll definitely win. That's right, that's right. Although the girl next to her looks prettier than Ji Shuatong and spoke well with the foreigner just now, how can she be compared to our foreign languages prodigy? It's impossible. The surrounding students were gossiping as if they wanted to dig up all the secrets of Ji Shuatong and Yunjian. When she heard the people around her praising Yunjian for being prettier than her, Ji Shuatong clenched her fists even tighter. She wasn't afraid, she was furious. Not only did she want to win today, but she also wanted to teach Yunjian a lesson in front of everyone. She wanted everyone present to see if she, the foreign languages prodigy, was better than this girl who came out of nowhere. Ever since Ji Shuatong pointed her finger at Yunjian and taunted her to pick her, Yunjian could already feel Ji Shuatong's hostility toward her. In response, Yunjian could not help but narrow her eyes. Her pair of exquisite beautiful eyes immediately flashed, and a bright light flashed by. I accept. Yunjian narrowed her eyes. Her large black eyes met Ji Shuatong's provocative gaze. Amidst the cheers and excitement of the crowd, the curtains of this battle had been raised. Ji Shuatong and Yunjian had the best oral performance, so the first round of the second round was between the 2 of them. There is no time limit for the foreign language battle. As long as you don't speak Chinese, you can speak any foreign language of any country. In addition, we will be focusing on English, so please start with English. In addition, if you can't answer the next sentence within 3 seconds, then this person is considered to have lost. One of the judges, who was fat and strong, sat on the bench at the front and announced the rules. The rules of this competition were very simple. As long as they didn't talk in Chinese, they could communicate in a foreign language. However, if one person couldn't answer the other person's question within 3 seconds, that person would lose. Hearing that it was not limited to English and that they could also converse in other languages, Ji Xuetang's arrogant attitude was once again displayed. She could speak 3 foreign languages. In other words, the languages of the 3 kingdoms. Among them, she was best at English. Other than that, she could also converse in simple Japanese and Korean. If that was the case, was Yun Jian not going to lose for sure? Haha, she, Ji Xuetang, loved the feeling of having victory in her grasp. Who else here could speak 3 foreign languages like her? The answer was no. Chapter 858. Can we begin? It was then that Yun Jian's nonchalant voice rang. She stood in front of the judges while all the teachers and students around her had their eyes on her. Yun Jian, however, did not look shy or afraid at all. On the contrary, Yun Jian stood with her arms crossed in front of her chest. Her lackadaisical manner caused an uproar among the audience. Was Yun Jian not afraid of going up against Ji Xuetang, who was known as the foreign languages prodigy? Or was she already confident of winning? Yes, we can begin. Even the fat and bulky judge was baffled by Yun Jian, but he recovered quickly. Now, I announce the start of the competition. The judge announced in his booming voice once he snapped back to reality. Both of you can start with any language you like. Even if you switch to another language halfway through, you must continue the previous question from your opponent, the judge told Yun Jian and Ji Xuetang again. Other than Ji Xuetang, there were many teachers who knew a lot of foreign languages. Of course, the main reason why Ji Xuetang stood out was that she was only 16 years old. She had the advantage of being young. Jian Jian, go for it. Yun Jian heard Ning Lanlan's cheer from the crowd out of the blue. One could still shout before the competition started. Yun Jian looked back. This time, she caught the source of Ning Lanlan's voice and saw Ning Lanlan, who was sitting in the crowd. Yun Jian returned a smile to Ning Lanlan. I'll start first. Ji Xuetang frowned in annoyance when she saw the situation. She had started the match in English. Since Ji Xuetang had started the match in English, the audience boasted and complimented her again. However, Ji Xuetang had already lifted her head to look at Yun Jian like a proud swan. She asked Yun Jian in a provocative English accent, "What do you like to do on the weekends?" It was usually a simple conversation in a foreign language, but the audience's hearts were clenched tightly. I'll go running on the weekends to strengthen my body. Yun Jian replied to Ji Xuetang in English smoothly. Right after she replied, Yun Jian asked, "What do you usually like to buy with money?" After 3 minutes, Yun Jian and Ji Xuetang's English conversation was evenly matched. Yun Jian had to admit that Ji Xuetang's English was pretty good. Even though her spoken English was a far cry from formal English, Ji Xuetang could always answer her questions within 3 seconds. The two of them were still conversing in English, but at that moment Ji Xuetang's forehead was already covered in sweat. She felt like she was about to die. He had to end this battle as soon as possible. Ji Xuetang's lips curled into a smirk. If you had the chance to travel, where would you choose to go? What? Yun Jian tilted her head and looked up. She crossed her arms in front of her chest lazily, as if she did not care about Ji Xuetang at all. I'll go to France because it's the city of romance. Ji Xuetang said the first half of her sentence in English. Right after she finished speaking, it was Ji Xuetang's turn to ask Yun Jian a question. She curled her lips and asked in Japanese, which was not very accurate, "Where do you usually travel on the weekends?" Ji Xuetang's sudden use of Japanese made everyone present feel refreshed. Here it comes. This Ji Xuetang was someone who could speak 3 foreign languages. Right after Ji Xuetang asked Yun Jian in Japanese, everyone present was certain that Yun Jian was going to lose this time. That was because no one understood what Ji Xuetang meant. Yun Jian probably did not even understand Japanese, right? How could she answer Ji Xuetang's question? In response, Ji Xuetang raised her head arrogantly and looked sideways at Yun Jian. Ji Xuetang was counting down. 3 seconds, 2 seconds. She was going to lose. Chapter 859. Other than English, foreign languages like Japanese and Korean could not be learned in school. Unless one studied in a foreign language high school, there would be a few teachers who knew other languages. Of course, they would only be taught during some elective classes. Of course, it was impossible for students to learn a foreign language in just a week of elective classes. Yun Jian was a student of Longmen E Junior High School, and there were no teachers in the school who knew other languages besides English. As for Ji Shuatong, she had been practicing with her tutor on the weekends, so she had learned 3 foreign languages. Initially, they thought that Yun Jian would not be able to understand Ji Shuatong speaking to Yun Jian in Japanese. At least at this moment, everyone present was certain that Yun Jian would lose. In the end, they did not expect Yun Jian to know Japanese. Yun Jian could speak Japanese too. Even Lawson, who was sitting in the referee's seat, could not help but straighten his back. The surrounding students, including the referee, all stared at the scene in front of them with wide eyes. Everyone present was dumbfounded. Ji Shuatong, who had vowed that Yun Jian would lose if she waited for 3 seconds, was now staring at Yun Jian in disbelief. The whole place was silent for a few seconds until Yun Jian asked Ji Shuatong in her beautiful Japanese voice, "Who do you usually hang out with on the weekends?" This was a very common conversation in a foreign language. Of course, it was not common when it was spoken in a foreign language. Ji Shuatong immediately recovered from her shock, and a sharp glint flashed across her eyes. "I usually stay at home with my parents," Ji Shuatong quickly replied in Japanese. At this moment, the atmosphere in the stadium reached its climax. From an English duel to a Japanese duel, who else could have such ability? After all, most of the people present could only determine which language Ji Shuatong and Yun Jian were speaking based on their accents. At this moment, Ji Shuatong suddenly changed her tone. She switched from Japanese to Korean and asked Yun Jian, "May I ask what star sign you are?" Her Korean was not very fluent. To be honest, Ji Shuatong's Korean was not very good. It was even worse than Japanese. However, for most of the people present who did not speak Korean, Ji Shuatong's pronunciation was already quite accurate and impressive. But now, Yun Jian wouldn't do it, would she? After all, Yun Jian couldn't have learned Korean, right? Even Lawson, who was sitting in the referee's seat, was worried for Yun Jian. Ji Shuatong even raised her proud head once more. She knew it. So what if Yun Jian knew 2 foreign languages? Wasn't this still no match for him? Looking at Ji Shuatong's unyielding face, Yun Jian only smiled coldly. She used to ignore people like Ji Shuatong, but she changed her mind today. Gemini. Yun Jian instantly replied Ji Shuatong in fluent Korean. How was this possible? Why did she know 3 foreign languages? How was this possible? Ji Shuatong was so shocked that she took 2 big steps back. However, just as Ji Shuatong took 2 steps back in shock, Yun Jian's voice was heard again. "So, do you want to continue?" This time it was in Russian. Yun Jian pursed her lips and smiled. She continued, "Maybe you can try to communicate with me in French." This was in French. "Actually, I don't mind continuing to talk to you in English." This time it was in Italian. Yun Jian spoke more than 10 languages in one go. The people present could only understand the pronunciation. Some of the languages were unfamiliar to them. Chapter 860. Even the referees who were in charge of hearing incorrectly slammed their tables and stood up in shock. Perhaps some of the students had never heard of the languages Yun Jian spoke before, but the teachers present had a wide range of contacts. They might not be able to understand some of the languages spoken, but they could still determine which language was spoken. It was undeniable that the words that came out of Yun Jian's mouth were in a foreign language. Moreover, Yun Jian spoke the languages of more than 10 countries. Did she start learning foreign languages when she was in her mother's womb? A female teacher who sat in front of the judge's seat bolted up from the table in shock. She looked at Yun Jian, the shock in her eyes clear for everyone to see. Teacher Lin Dan. A male teacher saw the female referee stand up and couldn't help but call out to her. The female teacher called Teacher Lin Dan stood up and walked towards Yun Jian. She stared with her big round eyes that seemed to be able to see through everything. At this moment, Teacher Lin Dan was already in front of Yun Jian. She looked at Yun Jian in disbelief and asked Yun Jian, "Student, you know the languages of more than 10 countries?" Everyone present was stunned when they heard Teacher Lin Dan's words. Who was this Teacher Lin Dan? She was the most senior foreign language teacher in Foreign Languages High School. She had mastered 5 foreign languages so far. Even in the entire Zhe province, she could temporarily occupy a position among the teachers. Yun Jian replied Teacher Lin Dan indifferently. Then she turned her eyes to Ji Shuatong, who was trembling in shock and unable to move. Yun Jian had always been the one to provoke others. No one had ever provoked her, Yun Jian. Therefore, Yun Jian wasn't afraid of exposing her background or being suspected. She looked up and stared straight at Ji Shuatong. Yun Jian's provocative words were the same as Ji Shuatong's. She returned the same provocation back to her. Do you still want to compete? You can choose any language from all over the world. I'm always up for it. After Yunjian finished speaking, she even blinked. She looked innocent and smiled faintly. Oh right, I forgot to tell you that other than knowing the languages of all over the country, I also know the local languages of some countries. What do you think? Do you want to compete again? I think we can fight for 100 rounds without a problem. If one were to ask why Yunjian knew so many languages, it was because Yunjian had traveled all over the country as slaying God in her past life. The missions that she took on assassinations of important people from all over the country. However, in order to kill him he had to sneak in. And in order to sneak in he had to learn the local language. Yunjian was fast and precise. She was able to master the simplest language in the shortest time. Of course, other than foreign languages like English and Chinese that were used more frequently, Yunjian could only communicate in many other languages. If she were to write these languages down, she might only be able to write a few of them with her standard. Yunjian's provocative words made everyone burst out in laughter. Soon there was a flurry of discussion. Haha, this is so exciting. This girl knows the languages of a dozen countries. That's amazing. I used to think that Ji Shuatong was the foreign languages prodigy and the best student in Longmen City. I didn't expect that there would always be someone better than her. Now that this girl is here, the foreign languages prodigy Ji Shuatong isn't even fit to carry her shoes. That's right. Ji Shuatong and I are in the same school. When she was crowned as the foreign languages prodigy, she was so smug like she was invincible in the universe. Let's see how she can still be so smug now. Chapter 861. Ji Shuatong did not have a good relationship with others. Due to her arrogant personality in the past, many people disapproved of her. Yunjian's actions were like a tight slap to Ji Shuatong's face. Some of the students almost stood up and cheered when they saw that. Ji Shuatong's face turned pale instantly when she heard the people's comments about her. Yunjian only found it funny. In the end, the judges announced that Yunjian had defeated Ji Shuatong. Ji Shuatong left the stage with a pale face. She claimed that she was not feeling well and left without participating in the rest of the competition. Apart from that, Yunjian's opponent could only admit that they were unlucky. What a joke. Yunjian knew more than 10 foreign languages. If they were not unlucky to go up against her, what was? The judges announced the results on the spot when the members of Group A were done with their competition. Naturally, the first place went to Yunjian. However, Yunjian did not feel proud or complacent at all. Therefore, many of the students were impressed by Yunjian. The junior division's competition was divided into 4 groups, A, B, C, and D. Once Group A's competition ended, there was nothing for them to do. However, since there were students from Longmen among the 4 groups, Yunjian had to stay here and wait for Group D's competition to end before she could return to Longmen with the rest of the students. She had nothing to do during this period. Ning Lanlan was in Group B. Yunjian waited for Ning Lanlan's competition to end before sneaking off with her from the junior division to the senior division. Yunjian was going to look for Yunyi. When Ning Lanlan heard that Yunjian was going to look for someone in the senior division, she blushed instantly. In the end, Ning Lanlan stammered and said that she knew a senior from the senior division. Ning Lanlan was a student from Foreign Languages High School. Yunjian told her that while they were walking and chatting. As Ning Lanlan was a student of Foreign Languages High School, she knew the route very well. With Ning Lanlan leading the way, Yunjian soon arrived at the senior section from the junior section of Foreign Languages High School. Because Yunyi was a high school student, even if they came to participate in the competition would be held in the High School of Foreign Languages High School. Jinjian, we can't go over here. There's a wall between the junior and senior sections. The teachers usually forbid junior section students from going to the senior section too. Ning Lanlan said dejectedly. However, as soon as she said that, Ning Lanlan suddenly pulled herself together. She looked at Yunjian and said, "Right, we can sneak a few glances at the fence of the basketball court. I should be able to see something." The word, secretly, made Yunjian curl her lips. Meanwhile, Yunjian had brought Ning Lanlan to the junction between the junior and senior sections of Foreign Languages High School. In front of them was a wall that was more than 2 meters high. Yunjian pointed at the wall and asked Ning Lanlan from the back, "Is the high school section through here?" Ning Lanlan nodded, a little scared yet a little excited. "Yeah. Come on." Yunjian hinted at Ning Lanlan with her hand, then pointed at the wall and asked, "Do you know how to climb walls?" Ning Lanlan looked at the wall that was more than 2 meters high and shook her head with a shudder. "Give me your hand," Yunjian said with a squint. Ning Lanlan was suspicious, but she still handed her hand to Yun Jian obediently. Just as she passed her hand to Yun Jian pulled her hand and dashed toward the wall. Ning Lanlan was so scared that her soul almost flew out of her body. When Yun Jian pulled her hand toward the wall and they were about to crash into it, Yun Jian suddenly wrapped her arms around Ning Lanlan's slim waist and leaped with both feet on the ground. Chapter 862. On the other side of the wall, a group of teenagers was running at full speed. They were about 17 or 18 years old, probably in high school. They were currently playing basketball on the basketball court. Foreign Languages High School's high school basketball court was just over there. In fact, there was a fence not far away. Looking through the fence, some boys from the high school could be seen playing basketball. Jiming, quick, pass the basketball to me. The teenagers running on the basketball court were doing vigorous exercises. They were drenched in sweat. Even though it was spring before summer, some of the boys had taken off their shirts to show off, revealing their muscular upper bodies. There were some girls sitting around them. They were currently watching the teenagers on the basketball court with intense screams. Ah! It was also at this moment that a sharp scream rang out, and at the same time, it was heard clearly by everyone present. The teenagers who were running on the basketball court looked at the high school's wall at the same time. All they saw were two heads on the wall all of a sudden. In the distance, some of the girls who were watching the group of teenagers running on the basketball court suddenly saw two heads appear on the wall. At this moment they were so scared that they screamed out loud. The group of youths who were still running on the basketball court all stopped in their tracks. Don't scream. Yun Jian was holding on to the top of the wall with one hand, preventing her and Ning Lanlan from sliding down. Ning Lanlan shut her mouth as soon as she heard Yun Jian's voice. In the next second, Ning Lanlan felt Yun Jian stomp hard on the wall they were hanging on. She felt Yun Jian using the momentum to push both of their bodies against the wall. Ah! Ning Lanlan shrieked uncontrollably. However, she quickly covered her mouth when she realized what had happened. The youths who were running on the basketball court and even the girls who saw Yun Jian and Ning Lanlan's heads from afar only saw that Yun Jian leaped off the wall while carrying Ning Lanlan. Even though she was carrying Ning Lanlan, Yun Jian's speed and movements were enough to astonish everyone present. The teenagers who were playing basketball held their breaths in shock. One of the youths looked at Yun Jian and exclaimed in shock, "Oh my God, this girl is amazing!" Before Ning Lanlan, who had just returned to her senses, could react, a male voice called out to her, "Lanlan? Why are you here?" Ning Lanlan lifted her head abruptly when she heard the voice. When she saw the boy's face clearly, she shouted in shock, Senior Jiming?" The moment Yun Jian heard the tone, she knew that the boy whom Ning Lanlan addressed as Senior Jiming was most likely the senior whom Ning Lanlan had mentioned to her before. It was only then that Xiao Jiming glanced at Ning Lanlan and Yun Jian. His lips curled slightly as he asked, "You guys climbed over the wall?" "Jian brought me here," Ning Lanlan said after she came to her senses. "Hey Jiming, when did you get to know these two beauties? What? Why don't you introduce them to me?" Just as Xiao Jiming and Ning Lanlan exchanged a few words, a ruffian-looking boy came over to put an arm around Xiao Jiming's shoulders and asked, "Hi, I'm Ning Lanlan. This is my friend Yun Jian. We're here to look for Jian's brother. He's a student who's here to participate in your high school's foreign language competition." Ning Lanlan told the ruffian-looking boy. "Oh, it's a foreign language competition. That's easy, we'll take you there," the ruffian-looking boy said at once. The ruffian-looking boy then turned to Yun Jian. His face was filled with teasing. Chapter 863. Yun Jian did not even bother with the ruffian-looking guy, which made him very upset. When Yun Jian walked forward with Ning Lanlan, one of the guys standing beside the basketball hoop mocked the ruffian-looking guy. "Shan Zihao, haha, I didn't expect you to be ignored by a girl." The ruffian-looking guy's name was Shan Zihao. He was thin and lean, the type that girls liked. He was quite tall, about 1.78 meters, with short black hair. He looked like the type that young girls liked. However, Yun Jian did not even bother with him, which shocked Shan Zihao. He had never been disliked by a girl like that before. Interesting, this girl is really interesting. Hey babes, don't walk so fast. I'll bring you over there." Shan Zihao took off his clothes from the basketball hoop, thinking that he looked cool. He then ran after Yun Jian and Ning Lanlan. Meanwhile, the senior that Ning Lanlan knew, Xiao Jiming, was already leading the way for Yun Jian and Ning Lanlan. Xiao Jiming was the kind of person who looked gentle. He did not usually like to show off his abilities. Just like the group of young men led by Shan Zihao who liked to show off in front of the girls without their upper bodies. Xiao Jiming's appearance was indeed handsome, and he was also the type that was quite popular among girls. However, his character was extremely gentle and refined, and he treated people very modestly. Xiao Zhiming was standing next to Ning Lanlan, leading the way for Yun Jian and Ning Lanlan. When Shan Zihao saw this, he quickly ran over and hugged Xiao Zhiming's shoulders from behind like a brother hugging a brother. "Hey, I'll go with you guys." Shan Zihao was not like Xiao Zhiming. He obviously followed them because he wanted to pick up girls. On the other hand, Xiao Zhiming only brought Yun Jian and Ning Lanlan over because he wanted to show them the way. "Shan Zihao, why are you joining in the fun? We're missing 2 people now. Are we not playing anymore?" The few young men who were playing basketball did not follow them. However, one of them shouted at Shan Zihao. "I'm not playing anymore, haha, I'm going to join in the fun." Shan Zi laughed and waved his hand. However, Yun Jian didn't care about Shan Zihao at all. Shan Zihao was walking on Xiao Zhiming's left. Ning Lanlan was on Xiao Zhiming's right while Yun Jian was on Ning Lanlan's right. The 4 of them stood side by side, but Yun Jian didn't say much at all. "The foreign language competition is up ahead," Xiao Zhiming said. Xiao Zhiming did not participate in the foreign language competition. They were only in PE class now. However, many students from foreign languages high school would rush over to watch the competition after class. Therefore, Xiao Zhiming and the others could move around freely. Ning Lanlan lowered her head and nodded shyly. Yun Jian, who was standing by the side, could tell with a single glance that Ning Lanlan was most likely interested in Xiao Zhiming. However, Yun Jian didn't think too much about it. At this moment, they had arrived at the foreign language competition venue of the high school. It was also crowded here. Yun Jian looked around for a long time but did not see her brother. However, she saw a familiar face. Su Haokol. Yun Jian's lips curled up slightly. As long as she found Su Haokol, it meant that Yun Yi must be nearby. This was because Su Haokol was Yun Jian's best buddy. Su Haokol was also Su Ziqian's son. Before Yun Jian walked over, she saw that Su Haokol had noticed her as well. Chapter 864. Su Haokol walked over with a hearty smile on his face. Yun Jian met his face. She returned his smile without losing any of her poise. I'm here to look for my brother." After a pause, Yun Jian asked again, "Where's my brother?" "Yun must be with Su Haokol." Yun Jian was certain of that. "He went to the toilet. I'm waiting for him here. The competition is starting soon," Su Haokol said simply to Yun Jian. Yun Jian nodded. Su Haokol was Su Ziqian's son. Su Ziqian was currently managing Falcon Hall on behalf of Yun Jian. Some time ago, Su Ziqian was severely injured and handed Falcon Hall over to Duan Lei to manage. At that thought, Yun Jian asked Su Haokol, "How's your father's recovery coming along? Little sister Yun Yi knows about my father's injuries?" Su Haokol was slightly shocked. Although Su Haokol was Su Ziqian's son, he knew that his father's Dragon Head gang had been taken over by a woman named Rakshasa and was renamed Falcon Hall. However, Su Haokol had never heard Su Ziqian mention who the current boss of Falcon Hall was. Moreover, he did not know if he knew that Yun Jian was the current boss of Falcon Hall. Su Ziqian didn't reveal a single thing to his son. Hence, when Su Haokol heard Yun Jian ask about his father's injuries, he was stunned for a while. However, Su Haokol was stunned for a while, but still nodded in confusion. Dad's much better now. He's almost recovered." Even Su Haokol was stunned, let alone Ning Lanlan and the others. Which teenage girl would ask about her father's injuries directly when meeting someone she knew? Yun Jian's actions made it hard for others not to overthink. However, Yun Jian wasn't bothered at all. She pointed at Ning Lanlan and introduced her to Su Haokol. "She's my friend Ning Lanlan." Then everyone present got to know each other. However, not only did Ning Lanlan remember Yun Jian asking about Su Haokol's father's injury, but even Xiao Zhiming and Shan Zihao remembered it. Shan Zihao almost blurted out the question. Why did Yun Jian care about someone else's father? But in the end, Shan Zihao held back. It had to be said that Yun Jian gave Shan Zihao a good first impression. However, Shan Zihao couldn't help but feel a little suspicious after hearing what he said. Could it be that Yun Jian had an affair with Su Haokol's father? Just as she thought about it, a voice familiar to Yun Jian rang. "Xiao Jian?" When she snapped back to reality, it was Yun Yi who was walking over from the washroom. Yun Jian grinned and introduced himself to Ning Lanlan and the others. Once everyone was familiar with each other, she strolled to the center of the competition area. When she saw Yun Yi, Yun Jian could not help whispering to him that Qingyu was coming back soon. When Yun Yi heard Yun Jian say that Qingyu was coming back, a glint flashed across his deep eyes. There was no need to mention how excited he looked. Qing Yu had been spending time with her parents in her hometown recently. Now that she was coming back, of course, Yuni was delighted. My parents will come and cheer for me. Su Hao Cole had just received a call and came back excitedly. For those who were about to start the competition, it was undoubtedly the happiest thing to have their family by their side. There was no other. Once he heard that Su Hao Cole's parents were coming, Shan Ziheo's dark eyes flickered as he turned to look at Yun Jian. Shan Ziheo had thought that Yun Jian might be having an affair with Su Hao Cole's father. After all, it was a little unreasonable for a girl to ask if someone's father was okay. Chapter 865. Comparatively speaking, Su Hao's current mood was simply indescribable with excitement. When Su Ziqian was the boss of Longmen City's top mafia group, Su Hao Cole dared not reveal the news to his friends. When Yun Yi found out later that Yun Yi treated him like a brother instead of distancing himself from him, it was impossible for Su Hao Cole not to be touched. What outsiders did not know was that Su Hao Cole yearned for his father's love and care. Su Hao Cole had known since he was young that his father would not appear in public. His father's birthday banquet was even used by Su Ziqian as a meal to better bond with his father. What more the usual occasions? Su Hao Cole's results were excellent. Although he had the capital to get in through the back door, Su Hao Cole and Yun Yi had both gotten into DE High School with their own abilities. He did not want to use his father's status as the boss of Longmen City. However, everything seemed to have changed after Dragon Head Gang was taken away by the woman named Slaying Luo. His father was still the boss of Falcon Hall, but now his father had much more free time than before. Since his father was heavily injured recently, Falcon Hall's boss, Slaying Luo, had given his father a long vacation. Su Hao Cole was very happy now because he had hoped that his parents could be by his side. Now his parents could even take time out to visit him. Su Hao Cole was very grateful to Slaying Luo of Falcon Hall. If Slaying Luo were to stand in front of him now, he would definitely thank her profusely. Isn't that a good thing? Yun Yi was in high spirits as well, wrapping his arm around Su Hao Cole's shoulder joyfully. Su Hao Cole nodded solemnly as he looked at his good buddy who was willing to talk about anything. Yun Jian smiled faintly as she stood on the side. When she smiled, the scenery around her seemed to brighten up for her. Shan Ziheo could not help being dumbfounded. However, once he thought that Yun Jian might really be having an affair with Su Hao Cole's father, his gaze darkened. He wanted to see what kind of person Su Hao Cole's father was. They're here. Su Hao Cole said excitedly to Yun Yi with his phone in hand. Sure. Just as Su Hao Cole was about to look around with his phone, a mature female voice called out. Yun Jian, Su Hao Cole and the others' head. Su Ziqian was slowly walking over with his wife's support. Su Ziqian's injuries were much better now. It wouldn't be long before he would be able to fully recover. Dad. Mom. When he saw his father Luo's father and his mother, his fathers and in Luo his mother and Luo, as for him. In the blink of an eye, Su Ziqian and Lin Wanru were already in front of the group. Su Ziqian merely nodded at Su Hao Cole. Lin Wanru came over to stroke Su Hao Cole's head with the motherly love of a woman. In spite of it, Su Ziqian froze the moment he saw Yun Jian. This scene was seen by Shan Ziheo, who was extremely sensitive, and he was taken aback. Was this person Su Hao Cole's father? Moreover, seeing how Su Ziqian froze when he saw Yun Jian, Shan Ziheo was even more suspicious that there was something going on between them. Just as Shan Ziheo thought about it, Su Ziqian's surprised voice called out to Yun Jian, Sister Jian? Why are you here? Chapter 866. Just as Su Ziqian called out to Sister Jian, Lin Wanru, who was holding his arm and supporting him, turned her head. Lin Wanru was a very virtuous wife. She was very responsible. When she heard that Su Ziqian was in trouble, she was scared out of her wits. It was just that Yun Jian saved Su Ziqian later. Therefore Lin Wanru was immensely grateful to Yun Jian. Su Hao Cole's father actually called Yun Jian Sister Jian? Called Yun Jian sister? Why was that? Shan Ziheo's impure thoughts were tossed to the back of his mind as he stared blankly. Shan Ziheo even wanted to slap himself. Su Hao Cole's father called Yun Jian Sister Jian, in such a respectful tone. How could he possibly have an impure relationship with Yun Jian? Moreover, Lin Wanru's subsequent behavior further proved this point. Su Ziqian could walk on his own without being helped. Therefore, when Lin Wanru saw Yun Jian, she let go of Su Ziqian's hand and went to Yun Jian. Looking at Yun Jian, she spoke to Yun Jian in a very respectful tone. It's you? Do you know my Zhe? Before Yun Jian could speak, Su Hao Cole was already asking Lin Wanru in confusion, Mom, she's my friend's younger sister. Lin Wanru was already holding Yun Jian's hand in a friendly manner as she looked at Yun Jian and said, "I see. I'm really grateful to you back then. I didn't expect you to be the younger sister of my juror's friend." Lin Wanru went on to thank Yun Jian, but other than Su Ziqian, everyone else present was baffled and had no idea what was going on. Although the people present were dumbfounded, they could still make out the gist of it. There was a high chance that Yun Jian had helped Lin Wanru and Su Ziqian in some big deal. No matter how they guessed, no one would have guessed that Yun Jian was Su Ziqian's boss and that it was Yun Jian who had saved Su Ziqian from the jaws of death when he was seriously injured. She was practically a lifesaver. Lin Wanru held Yun Jian's hand and thanked her profusely. Yun Jian nodded nonchalantly until an announcement came from the broadcast. "Students, please gather at the competition venue. The foreign language competition is about to begin." Once they heard that, Yun Yi and Su Hao Cole hurried to the venue. "Dad, Mom, Sister Yi, come with us. The competition is starting. Will be starting in a while. You can watch us from there," explained Su Hao Cole, and Yun Yi then led their group to the venue. With Yun Jian and Yun Jian followed them. When they arrived at the competition venue, there were fewer people here than in the junior department, but there was still a lot of traffic. Not long after Yun Jian stood there, she caught sight of a familiar face in the blink of an eye. "Mr. Peter?" She saw that Peter was talking to Headmaster Zhang of Foreign Languages High School in the distance. Principal Zhang of Foreign Languages High School looked very respectful to Peter, and Peter also put his hands behind his back. His skin was delicate, and there was a hint of handsomeness between his eyebrows. His nose was straight and he looked like a mixed blood. Wasn't Mr. Peter the thief who stole the antiques from Jia province last time? What? Did he steal them to the school? Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. Peter even put on a serious posture and walked side by side with Headmaster Zhang of Foreign Languages High School. He had just turned a corner when he saw Yun Jian, who was looking at him with narrowed eyes. Peter was still striding forward, but when he saw Yun Jian he was so scared that he lost his footing and sprained his left foot. Chapter 867. Peter had been talking to Principal Zhang of Foreign Languages High School in a serious manner just now. Moreover, Peter had been praised by Principal Zhang. Pete, who was still drowning in the praises just now, was flummoxed the moment he saw Yun Jian. Peter sprained his ankle, but he did not care about the pain at all. He looked at Yun Jian with fear in his eyes, as if he was afraid that Yun Jian would charge at him. Meanwhile, Peter said to Principal Zhang, Principal Zhang, I'm leaving now. Let's talk about this next time." "Hey, Mr. Peter." Principal Zhang had just opened his mouth when he saw Peter had already turned around and was about to run to the school building. Principal Zhang was a little surprised. Seeing that Peter was about to run to the school building, he was even more suspicious. Why is Mr. Peter running to the school building when he's leaving? Shouldn't he be heading to the school gate? Just as Principal Zhang was thinking about that, a teenage girl around 16 years old suddenly walked up to him. She stood in front of everyone and shouted at Peter's back, "Peter, where do you think you're going?" Yun Yi and Su Hao Cole, who had yet to gather at the competition venue, were stunned. Shan Zihao and Xiao Jiming, who had been on the basketball team since the beginning, were stunned. Ning Lanlan was completely dumbfounded. Su Ziqian and his wife, Lin Wanru, were also looking at Yun Jian, who was walking toward Peter, with bewilderment. The group of people was dumbfounded as they watched Yun Jian call out to Peter. Why is Yun Jian calling out to him again? Does he know her? The people present were stunned because of bewilderment. Shan Zihao's eyes narrowed even more when he saw Yun Jian taking a step forward to stop Peter. What does she want? However, no matter what, Shan Zihao, felt that his interest in her was growing. Meanwhile, everyone saw Peter stop in his tracks from afar. Peter's feet came to a sudden halt. He wanted to slip away, but Yun Jian called out to him. Peter also knew that if he didn't stop with Yun Jian's strength, she would definitely catch up to him. Peter, on the other hand, was one of the best thieves in the world. He was not afraid of anything except Yun Jian. The antique that was stolen in Jia province last time was recovered by Yun Jian. Motherf asterisk her, why is she everywhere? Peter slowly turned his head and smiled at Yun Jian, but it was a forced and bitter smile. Hey, what a coincidence, we meet again. Peter looked at Yun Jian with a smile that was more awkward than crying. If he had known that Yun Jian would be here today, he wouldn't have come even if he was beaten to death. No, it's just a coincidence. As Yun Jian spoke, she had already arrived in front of Peter. The people watching from afar were a little suspicious. Yun Jian was acquainted with this man? Yun Yi, Su Hao Cole, Su Ziqian, Zhang Zihao and the others were just thinking about it. Even Principal Zhang was a little confused as to why Peter, who was full of confidence just now, would talk to Yunjian in such a scared tone. Peter suddenly changed his tone. He looked at Yunjian, and in the next second he clasped his hands together and bent over to look at Yunjian with a comical and begging posture. "Oh my God, I beg you to forgive me. The thing you wanted last time was something I obtained with great difficulty, and I've already given it to you. I really don't have anything on me now, so please let me go, huh? Oh my God, because of you, I'm about to go begging on the streets." Peter, a grown man, actually begged for mercy in front of Yunjian. The people present were confused and shocked. Chapter 868. As an international master thief, Peter's stealing skills were exceptionally high. His nimble skills could be considered as one of the best in the world. It could be said that he had only been robbed twice since he debuted. Both times it was because of Yunjian. The first time was because of Yunjian in his past life, and the other time was the theft of antiques in Zhe province not long ago. Both times Yunjian had recovered the stolen items. Peter had promised his employer that he could steal the items, and his employer had even paid a deposit. Because of Yunjian's interference, not only did Peter fail to complete his mission, he even had to pay 10 times the penalty. 10 times the penalty was as high as hundreds of millions of US dollars. Therefore, to Peter, the scariest thing in his life was not encountering a ghost but encountering Yunjian. That was why Peter wanted to slip away the moment he saw Yunjian. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect to run into Yunjian here. It was scarier than being caught absent-mindedly in class. "Did you do something bad again?" Yunjian narrowed her eyes at Peter and crossed her arms in front of her chest. Her relaxed posture made Peter's heart clench. "No. How could I? Do I dare?" Peter spoke fluent Chinese, but it wasn't hard to see that Peter was a mixed race. One of his parents was probably from country Z. "Please let me go. I have parents and children to take care of. I really didn't do anything bad this time. Can you do me a favor and not harass me?" Peter's fear of Yunjian had reached a whole new level. He kept calling her Grand Aunt, which made Yunjian dizzy. Yunjian was not here to cause trouble for Peter. She was just surprised to see him here and wanted to go over to greet him. She did not expect Peter to avoid her like the plague, so Yunjian called out to him playfully. "Xiao Jian, what's this?" At this moment, Yun Yi and the others had also followed Yunjian over. They looked at the scene in front of them in shock. "Old friend," Yunjian said readily. "My dear mother, great aunt, I don't dare to be friends with you." Peter was a straightforward person. He made an exaggerated gesture. His fear of Yunjian was exaggerated and comical. Why was he so afraid of Yunjian? Yunjian was not a river beast. Yun Yi and Su Haokol were not the only ones who were shocked. Ning Lanlan, Xiao Jiming and Shan Zihao in particular, could not be more stunned. If Yunjian looked so scary, then, just as everyone thought of this, they saw Principal Zhang standing in front of Yunjian. Principal Zhang paused before speaking to Yunjian. "Student, I don't know which school you're from, but I can assure you that Mr. Peter isn't a bad person. Not only am I the principal of Foreign Languages High School, but I'm also the president of Dragon Gate Charity Organization and the director of Hui En Orphanage. There are too many children in this world who are suffering from despair and pain. They're orphans and have no one to rely on. Some of them can't even feed themselves 3 times a day. Hui En Orphanage has adopted a large number of such children. They don't have a source of income, so even food and clothing are a problem. In recent years, however, it's Mr. Peter who's donated a large sum of money to Hui En Orphanage every month to help the children grow up. We and the children are very grateful to him." Chapter 869. Yunjian narrowed her eyes at Principal Zhang's righteous words that were filled with reverence for Peter. She was stunned for 2 seconds as well. Who would have thought that Peter had stolen so many cultural relics and earned so much money just to donate them? It was no wonder Peter looked so pathetic every time. According to what Yunjian knew, Peter accepted all kinds of missions. With Peter's capability, how could he be so poor that he would accept the lowest level of theft? When Yunjian saw him in the past, Peter had always made himself poor. Yunjian was skeptical. Peter was an international thief after all. Where did he spend all the money he earned all these years and spend it all so quickly? He even made himself look like a poor man. Now Yunjian knew. "You're quite capable." Yunjian smiled faintly and even flashed her pearly white teeth at Peter. "We're old friends. Why don't we go for a walk?" Peter was stunned for 2 seconds. Was he seeing things? Did he just see a friendly gaze in Yunjian's eyes? Oh, okay. For some reason, Peter agreed to Yunjian's request. Once he agreed, however, he regretted it immediately. He was freaking terrified of Yunjian. The few times he saw Yun Jian, he was always tortured by Yun Jian. The last time they met, Yun Jian had even snatched the antique he had risked his life to get. Xiao Jin, Zhe and I are going for the competition. They could not forget about the competition. Yunyi looked at Yun Jian. He had no idea how Yun Jian knew Peter, but the latter did not look like a bad guy, so he followed Su Haokol to the competition venue without worry. Shan Zihao and the others were dumbfounded by what they saw. Yun Jian then started chatting with Peter. Su Ziqian and Lin Wanru had already followed them to watch Su Haokol's competition. After the few of them left, only Ning Lanlan, Xiao Jiming and Shan Zihao were left in the area. Principal Zhang also left later because he had something to do. Coincidentally, it wasn't easy for Ning Lanlan and Xiao Jiming to meet each other. The two of them chatted happily. Thus, the only person who stood beside Yun Jian and Peter to listen to their conversation was Shan Zihao. Shan Zihao already had a good impression of Yun Jian. Now that he saw how friendly Yun Jian was with Peter, he felt slightly displeased. But at this moment Shan Zihao was completely ignored. He could only stand aside and listen. He stood there like a ruffian, but he didn't leave. After Yun Jian and Peter calmed down and chatted for a while, she realized that Peter's character was actually quite good. Especially Peter. After talking to Yun Jian, his fear of Yun Jian was reduced by 2 points. Hey Grandaunt, so your house is in Longmen City? Peter did not realize that he did not know Yun Jian's name and was still addressing Yun Jian as Grandaunt. I'm Yun Jian. If I hear Grandaunt again, I'll snatch your stuff again, Yun Jian smirked and said as if she was threatening Peter. Damn Grandaunt you. No Yun Jian, don't snatch my stuff. If it weren't for you, I, Peter, would still be the holder of 0 failures in the underworld. I might even be awarded a big prize one day. Peter struck a narcissistic pose and told Yun Jian. Yun Jian and Peter got into the conversation as they chatted. Shan Zihao, on the other hand, had no idea what was going on. He had no idea what Yun Jian and Peter were talking about. Snatch his stuff? What holder of 0 failures in the underworld? Chapter 870. However, the more mysterious Yun Jian became, the more Shan Zihao wanted to dig out Yun Jian's secrets. All in all, Shan Zihao's interest in Yun Jian was growing. Yun Jian pressed her lips together and smiled softly at Peter's amusing words. Not anymore. Yun Jian then looked up at Peter. What about you? Why did you appear in Longmen City? Me. Peter chuckled at the mention of himself and pointed at himself with a smile. My grandma is from Longmen City. I got lost when I was young and spent my time in the orphanage. The hard days in the orphanage weren't even 1,000th of what came after, but to me, the unbearable hunger was the hardest time of my life. Since then, I've donated all the money I earned to the orphanage. Longmen City is my grandma's hometown, of course I have to give priority to the donation. Peter shrugged and continued in a gloomy tone. Actually, my mother came from the Huiyan orphanage. She got sick from starvation when she was young, so she died of cancer at a young age. When I found her home, she was already gone. Only my grandma was left at home. When Peter's grandmother was young, they were poor and had many children. Even food was a problem for the family when they could not afford to eat. Helpless, they could only send Peter's mother to Huiyan orphanage, hoping that she could survive. Huiyan orphanage had little to eat and the children grew up hungry. Peter's mother grew up and became successful. She met Peter's father when she was traveling abroad. Peter's father was from country Y, but Peter's mother insisted on being with him despite the hardships of a foreign relationship. They could have lived happily together as a family. However, Peter's mother fell sick. It was a terminal illness due to starvation in the orphanage when she was young. Peter's mother passed away not long after. Peter's grandmother was a snobbish person. She had always thought that Peter's mother was not good enough for Peter's father. Therefore, when Peter's mother passed away and Peter's father was dispirited, his grandmother sent Peter to an orphanage in country Z. Peter spent an indescribable time in the orphanage. Later on, Peter was taken away by an old master and was taught the old master's lifelong skills of stealing. Through Peter's own hard work, he became the current international thief, Mr. Peter. In fact, Pete was a ZY hybrid. Of course, Peter didn't say that he was a thief in front of Shan Zihao. He just made a rough summary and summarized the whole story with a similar story. After listening to Peter's story, Yun Jian was slightly shaken. Not to mention Shan Zihao. At this moment, Shan Zihao sympathized with Peter. However, it had to be said that Peter was a talent. Perhaps the thieving skills that Peter's master had taught him could only help him become one of the best thieving masters in the country. This had something to do with talent. At the very least, Peter was able to become a world-class master thief because of his own efforts. When Shan Zihao saw Yun Jian listening to Peter's touching story, he felt that girls would usually cry after hearing such a touching story. However, when Shan Zihao turned his gaze to Yun Jian, he saw Yun Jian looking at Peter and saying something completely different from what Shan Zihao had imagined. "Follow me and you can set the salary." Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. Her confident look surprised Shan Zihao. Chapter 871. Work with her? What for? What could he do by following her? These were Shan Zihao's thoughts. Shan Zihao's current state of mind was indescribable. Yun Jian's actions were getting more mysterious. Of course, the more mysterious Yun Jian was, the more Shan Zihao's interest in Yun Jian grew. Humans were all despicable, especially those like Shan Zihao who lived like a prince. In foreign languages high school, Shan Zihao was no doubt the target of girls' adoration. Not only was he handsome and pleasing to the eyes, but he also had the cool personality that girls liked. It was rare for him to meet a girl like Yun Jian. Not only did Yun Jian ignore him in the beginning, the sense of mystery she exuded had only intensified since the beginning. She brought Ning Lanlan over the wall, her unusual skills, Su Haokole's father calling her Sister Jian, and the fact that Peter, a mixed blood, was so fearful of her. Shan Zihao's interest was gradually piqued as he listened to these stories. The more unobtainable something was, the more one wanted to explore it. Shan Zihao was probably the epitome of this saying. It was then that Peter cried out in shock. "Work with you? I can set my salary? For real?" Peter scanned Yun Jian from head to toe. After all, Yun Jian gave him a terrifying vibe. When Yun Jian robbed him of his stolen items, it was no different from robbing him of his money. Now Yun Jian was telling him to work with her and set his salary as he pleased. To Peter, he was already extremely lucky that Yun Jian did not steal his things. Now she was asking him to work for her? "I'm not joking. I just want an answer from you. Do you agree or not?" Yun Jian crossed her arms in front of her chest. She was not in a hurry for Peter's answer. Peter kept quiet for a while. It was only when Yun Jian spoke again that he snapped back to reality. "Of course. As long as you agree, I'll send someone to get you out of Fox Hunters' control immediately." Peter had signed a long-term contract with Fox Hunters. As an international thief, he naturally had a backer. The Fox Hunting Organization was an internationally renowned organization of thieves. The reason why the Fox Hunting Organization was called a thief organization was because it was different from the Inhun Organization and the Kosha mercenaries. The Fox Hunting Organization had a quirk, which was that they only accepted things that their employers wanted to steal or treasures that they wanted to find. Other than that, it never accepted missions that involved killing people. It could be said that the Fox Hunting Organization was the concentration camp for Peter and his group of thieves. Therefore, the Fox Hunting Organization, the Inhun Organization, and the Kosha mercenaries did not have any conflicts of interest. However, Yun Jian knew that Peter had signed a 10-year contract with the Fox Hunting Organization. In other words, for the next 10 years, Peter would work for the Fox Hunting Organization. In other words, for the next 10 years, all the missions he took on would have to go through the Fox Hunting Organization. Furthermore, during this period, half of the money he earned would have to be shared with the Fox Hunting Organization. Under such circumstances, Peter really wanted to get rid of the Fox Hunting Organization. Yun Jian's words were more tempting than anything else. As expected, the moment Yun Jian finished her words, Peter's eyes lit up. He looked at Yun Jian with a very excited gaze. "Really? You can really help me get rid of the Fox Hunting Organization? Are you willing to work for me?" Yun Jian did not give Peter a definite answer. She only repeated her previous question. "Yes, yes, yes." Peter nodded his head like a rattledrum. Shan Zihao, who was standing at the side, saw this. He looked at Yun Jian and Peter with even more shock than before. Chapter 872. Of course, Shan Zihao had never heard of the Fox Hunting Organization. The Fox Hunting Organization was a highly skilled thief organization, but there was something different about it. The Fox Hunting Organization was different from the Inhun Organization and the Kosha mercenaries. The appearance of large organizations like the Inhun Organization and the Kosha mercenaries would cause an uproar. Even organizations like the Inhun Organization and the Kosha mercenaries were often published in the major international newspapers and magazines in Country M. They were listed by many businessmen and politicians as a force to be reckoned with. However, the Fox Hunting Organization was different. Very few people in the underworld knew about the Fox Hunting Organization, and only those collectors who loved collecting antiques would find out about the Fox Hunting Organization's whereabouts. Because the Fox Hunting Organization was only involved in stealing, the members of the organization were only in charge of stealing. Moreover, the fox hunting organization had never been publicized, but it had a place in the international community. In short, those who knew about the fox hunting organization had to have great influence and status in the international community. In other words, if you didn't have power and influence, you wouldn't even know about the existence of the fox hunting organization. Therefore, Yun Jian wasn't afraid to speak about the fox hunting organization in front of Shan Zihao. If it was said that Peter was fearful of Yun Jian at the beginning, then at this moment he was full of expectations for Yun Jian. He was very much looking forward to Yun Jian helping him break free from the fox hunting organization's control. Moreover, he could tell from the fact that Yun Jian had stolen from the famous thief. Yun Jian definitely wasn't someone who lacked money, so Peter immediately agreed to Yun Jian's request. Okay. Yun Jian seemed to know that Peter would agree to her request, so she just nodded. 2 seconds later she spoke to Peter in fluent Hindi. 2 days later, report to the kosher mercenaries. Look for the kosher mercenaries snake. Tell them that it was Yun Jian who told you. Yun Jian spoke to Peter in Hindi, and her sudden change of language stunned Shan Zihao. Then Yun Jian switched back to Chinese. I believe you can find its address. Of course, she was referring to the kosher mercenaries. Yun Jian pursed her lips into a half-smile. There was an unfathomable sweetness in her smile. Peter obviously understood Hindustani, not to mention that Yun Jian spoke Hindustani for Peter to understand. Furthermore, Yun Jian's main purpose was to prevent Shan Zihao from understanding that sentence. However, after Yun Jian said that sentence, Shan Zihao couldn't figure it out. He looked at the interaction between Yun Jian and Peter and couldn't help but ask Yun Jian, "What language were you speaking just now? Why can't I understand what you're saying?" Yun Jian glanced at Shan Zihao, who was standing by the side. Only now did she remember that there was someone like Shan Zihao by her side. Hearing Shan Zihao's question, Yun Jian only glanced at him slightly, then calmly replied with 3 words, "Hindi." Yun Jian didn't even bother to reply to Shan Zihao. Then Yun Jian shifted her gaze to Peter. Peter was stunned for a few seconds. Kosher mercenaries? Looking for snake? Lizard? Then what was Yun Jian's identity? Fortunately, Peter was slow enough so he didn't immediately understand the stakes involved. Okay. Peter nodded and said to Yun Jian. Then I'll leave you to it. I'm going to watch my brother's match, Yun Jian said. Okay. Peter didn't even realize that he had been poached by Yun Jian. He was still thinking about the relationship between Yun Jian and the kosher mercenaries. Chapter 873. Yun Jian did not come here to poach Peter. She came here to watch Yun Yi's competition. Moreover, Yun Jian did not even know that Peter would be here. However, Yun Jian did not expect that she would be able to poach Peter over just like that. However, she had to admit that this trip was really worth it. After all, Peter was an international master thief. He was one of the top figures in the entire world. For such a big shot like Peter to join the kosher mercenaries, it was also a way to expand the kosher mercenaries' strength. After all, those old guys had been eliminated. At this juncture, expanding the strength of the kosher mercenaries was a path that Yun Jian had to take. The competition has started. Ning Lanlan said to Yun Jian excitedly. Of course, she was not excited because the competition was about to start, but because Xiao Jiming was by her side. Ning Lanlan was dragged by Yun Jian to watch Yun Yi's competition. As Ning Lanlan's senior, Xiao Jiming naturally would not leave. Yun Jian could also feel Ning Lanlan's admiration for Xiao Jiming, so she did not say anything. After Xiao Jiming came over, Shan Zihao followed as well. Yun Jian might not hate Xiao Jiming, but Yun Jian did not like to see Shan Zihao. However, since he was shameless enough to stick to her, Yun Jian could not do anything about it. Peter stood rooted to the spot, dumbfounded. No matter how he racked his brain, he could not figure out the relationship between Yun Jian and Wuxia mercenaries. It was undeniable that Peter was a little slow. He stood there thinking for a long time before he suddenly remembered. Yun Jian wanted him to join the kosher mercenaries because she wanted him to join the kosher mercenaries. However, Yun Jian wanted him to look for snake. Lizard, snake. Lizard was the leader of the kosher mercenaries. What did Yun Jian mean by asking him to find snake? Lizard? Peter held his forehead with both hands. He shook his head and couldn't stop thinking. What was the relationship between them? If Yun Jian could send him to the kosher mercenaries, it meant that her position in the kosher mercenaries was not low. However, if she could order the leader of the kosher mercenaries, Snake Lizard, to do things for her, it meant that her position was higher than Snake Lizard's. If Yun Jian's status was higher than Snake Lizard's, then there was only one possibility, then she is Just as Peter thought of this, he suddenly covered his mouth and widened his eyes in horror. Could she be the legendary person? Just as Peter was thinking about this, Yun Jian, Ning Lanlan, and the others arrived at the arena. Cheers had already begun to erupt from the competition grounds. The intensity of the competition was no less than that of the junior division. Although there were more participants in the junior division than the senior division, Yun Jian darted out from the crowd. She saw Yun Yi from afar at first glance. Yun Yi was the same as Su Haokol. Both of them were handsome and tall young men. Hence Yun Jian could see them from the crowd. The moment Yun Jian walked over, Su Haokol saw her first. Su Haokol happened to be standing beside Yun Yi. When he saw Yun Jian coming over, Su Haokol even poked Yun Yi, who was still looking around. Yun Yi followed Su Haokol's gaze and saw Yun Jian standing in the crowd looking at her. Yun Yi turned around and smiled at Yun Jian. "Bro, do your best," Yun Jian mouthed silently to Yun Yi. Chapter 874. Yun Yi and Su Haokol were both very good at speaking English. This time, Yun Yi and Su Haokol were the representatives of the first senior high school to participate in the competition. Therefore Yun Yi's English was better than Su Haokol's. Therefore Yun Yi and Su Haokol got very good results in the first round of the competition. After the second round of the competition, the winner was decided. Without a doubt, Yun Yi was the top student in the middle school. Yun Yi got the same result as Yun Jian. The only difference was that Yun Jian was the top student in the middle school section, while Yun Yi was the top student in the high school section. Su Haokol also got a good result. Although he was not as good as Yun Yi, he still got the 10th place in the whole high school, which was quite good. After the two competitions were over, the students went back home. Lawson wanted to go out with Yun Jian, but he was invited by the school to be the referee, so he had to go back home after the competition. Today was Wednesday and it was not the weekend yet. Lawson was embarrassed to ask Yun Jian to play truant with him, so he had to give up the chance to compete with Yun Jian again. Before he left, however, Lawson reminded Yun Jian again and again that they would meet again next time. When he was about to leave, Lawson said to Yun Jian in English, "Yun Jian, the next time we meet, you must let me win." Next time he did not know if there would be a next time. In spite of it, Yun Jian smiled and nodded with pressed lips. "Emin?" In the end, Yun Jian added, "The next time we meet, you will still be defeated by me." Yun Jian's words were harsh, but this time they were very encouraging to Lawson. He laughed and said goodbye to Yun Jian. As for Ning Lanlan, her new friend, she exchanged contact information with Yun Jian and promised to go out together next time. Yun Jian had a good impression of Ning Lanlan, so she was happy to be friends with her, so she nodded and agreed. In the end, Shan Zihao watched as Yun Jian took the bus back to Longmen No. 1 High School. Since he had a good impression of Yun Jian, he could only watch her leave. However, Shan Zihao was not willing to give up just like that. It was rare for him to like a girl, so how could he give up before pursuing her? Moreover, Xiao Jiming was his buddy and Xiao Jiming was close with Ning Lanlan. Now that Ning Lanlan was close to Yun Jian, as long as he held on to Ning Lanlan, he was not afraid that he could not catch up to Yun Jian. A week passed by quickly. It was Friday in the blink of an eye. Yun Jian carried her backpack and walked out of the school. In the past, with Chen Xini and Zhang Xiaofeng accompanying her, the journey from the teaching building to the school gate was filled with laughter. However, without the two clowns, Yun Jian felt empty in her heart and it was not a good feeling. However, when she recalled Chen Xini's father inviting her to his house for dinner last week, Yun Jian felt relieved. This meant that she would be able to meet Chen Xini. Yun Jian then hurried home. She would not be having dinner at home today. Yun Jian returned to Dong Ruan's villa, tossed her backpack into her room and went downstairs. She was going to Gu Yunjian's house for dinner today. As Gu Junjian and Qin Yiru's wedding was getting closer, Qin Yiru would definitely move to Gu Yunjian's house if they got married. Hence, Qin Yiru had already started moving her things. They had already agreed on tonight. Qin Yiru brought Xiao Yunju and the other two to Gu Yunjian's house, intending to enjoy a table of delicious food. Chapter 875. Yun Jian had just reached the middle of the staircase when she felt Ce standing behind her. "I'm going to Officer Ji's house for dinner." Yun Jian could feel Ce standing behind her. She pursed her red lips and said. Before Gu Junjian and Qin Yiru got married, Yun Jian had always addressed Gu Junjian as Officer Gu. After all, once Gu Junjian and Qin Yiru were legally married, it would only be reasonable for Yun Jian to address Gu Junjian as Dad. Yun Jian knew that Ce didn't know that they were going to Gu Yunjian's house for dinner today. Hence, she turned her head and looked at him with her big black eyes. Mom told us that we'll go to Officer G's house for dinner after school. Yunjian added, my brother will be there too. Adam and Lan Su will be there too. You can come with me. There was no one at home. Everyone was rushing to Yunjian's house for dinner. Yunjian didn't expect CE to be back at this time because he was usually at an Hun organization from Monday to Friday. CE's honest voice sounded. His handsome face was slowly leaning towards Yunjian. So you're saying that there's no one at home now? CE's warm breath surrounded Yunjian. This made Yunjian feel a tingling sensation. Yunjian didn't think too much about it. She turned around and was about to go downstairs when she said to CE, let's go over quickly too. My mom said that we should come early tonight. Otherwise the food will get cold. Ever since she bought phones for Qin Yiru and Yunyi, it was very convenient for Yunjian to contact them. Upon hearing Yunjian say that there was no one at home, CE's eyes flashed. Just as Yunjian was about to turn around and head downstairs, CE suddenly grabbed her wrist. Yunjian was stunned, but she didn't think too much about it. Let's hurry over. Before she could finish her sentence, CE suddenly pulled Yunjian over. He pulled Yunjian to the stairs and blocked her with his muscular body. Like a cabotin, he pinned Yunjian against the wall of the stairs. Yunjian was shocked and wanted to say something, but CE ruthlessly squeezed her words out. Her lips were tightly shut as she tossed and turned. CE was panting heavily as he kissed Yunjian. Yunjian shuddered from the kiss. Coupled with CE's steady breathing, her emotions were in a mess. Just as Yunjian was about to suffocate, CE let go of her. At the same time, Yunjian was looking away from the corner of her eyes. CE was tall. He was one step lower than Yunjian, but he was still about half a head taller than Yunjian. CE extended his slender arms to hold Yunjian's head and gently moved Yunjian in front of him to look into his eyes. Xiaojian, what should I do? You're so beautiful. I don't want anyone to see your beauty. CE looked at Yunjian affectionately. After a while, CE held Yunjian's head again and inched closer. Yunjian knew that CE must have known about Shan Ziheo's love for her. CE was not around when it happened, but he would know if Yunjian made any noise. When their lips were about to touch, Yunjian felt CE's breath filling her. He looked at her with his dark eyes and said, I really want to imprison you under me. As he spoke, he pressed his lips against hers. Chapter 876. Yunjian's eyes instantly lit up. At the same time, CE's mischievous hand had already gently slid across Yunjian's flat stomach. Their lips were still pressed together. CE's lips carried a faint fragrance. Yunjian didn't hate it. Instead, she was looking forward to it. However, when CE's hand reached under Yunjian's clothes, Yunjian could no longer pretend that she didn't see anything. She quickly reached out and pressed down on CE's mischievous hand. Her eyes widened. However, this didn't seem to be able to stop CE's hand. CE's hand slid past Yunjian's clothes and broke through Yunjian's resistance. He slid along Yunjian's beautiful body and slid into her bra. His hand covered her left breast. Yunjian's entire body went numb. Just as she was about to pull his hand away, she felt CE's lips on hers become even more unbridled. Yunjian's lips were sealed. Her lips couldn't move. She pressed against CE's chest with her hand, as if she wanted to push CE away so that his hand would leave her body. However, CE didn't release his hand. Looking at Yunjian in front of him, he felt that she was even more alluring. His large hand even caressed her a little and gently grabbed her. Yunjian had never been so close to a certain part of her body. She couldn't help but groan. However, her eyes were wide open. The blush on her face was a sign of her shyness at this moment. Just as Yunjian was about to suffocate, CE finally let go of Yunjian's lips. However, at the same time, he used his other hand to grab a certain part of her butt. Yunjian's entire body shuddered as she felt the soft sensation of her forbidden area being touched. Yunjian almost groaned again. Let go. Let go. In the next second, Yunjian, who had regained her right to speak, slapped CE's hand a few times. However, to CE it didn't hurt at all. At this moment, CE had already leaned over to Yunjian's ear. At this moment, one of CE's legs was shorter than Yunjian's, while the other leg was on the same position as Yunjian's. Even so, he was still taller than Yunjian by half a head. At this moment, CE had already bent down and pressed his lips against Yunjian's earlobe, where her collarbone was. Xiaojian, you're so beautiful. CE moaned softly. Right after that, he pressed his lips against Yunjian's neck even more brazenly. His domineering and possessive voice rang again. Next time you're not allowed to be so close to other guys. If they pester you, you're not allowed to be within 3 meters of them either. As he spoke, Siyi's handsome lips curled up slightly. If anyone present saw how Siyi looked right now, they would definitely be mesmerized by his demeanor. His flawless and absolutely possessive handsome face was enough to make people infatuated just by recalling his handsome face. If you don't listen to me next time then? Siyi had already moved his lips back to Yunjian's earlobe. With a smirk, he uttered his final words, "Then I'll make you mine right away. Right away. Right away." God knew how much he wanted this girl in front of him. However, once he recalled his promise to Qin Yiru, it looked like he was going to have to break his promise. It was impossible for him to wait until Yunjian came of age. Yunjian was dazed by Siyi's words, but her cheeks were burning. She had never been treated like this before, but if someone else had told her this, Yunjian would not have felt anything. Chapter 877. In spite of it, Siyi's naughty hand was still glued to Yunjian's plump breasts when he said that. His other hand was on one of her buttocks. Both of his actions made Yunjian blush uncontrollably. Strangely, this new and entirely different feeling did not make Yunjian feel disgusted. Instead, she was looking forward to what he was going to do next. Yunjian was shocked by her own thoughts. Shaking her head, she bit her lip lightly and tossed the thought to the back of her mind. "Xiaojian, are you back? Why didn't you close the door? What if a stray dog came in?" Yunyi's voice came from the door. It was a villa and was surrounded by places that only the rich could afford to live in. However, there were plenty of stray dogs and domesticated dogs nearby. Some time ago, because the owner of a nearby villa forgot to close the door, a stray dog ran into his house. After the stray dog ran into his house, the owner of the villa returned home and saw it. Naturally, he wanted to drive the stray dog away. However, the dog became arrogant when it was chased by the owner and bit him. The owner went to the hospital to get a rabies vaccine. In the end, he received news that the stray dog died not long after. The reason was that the stray dog had contracted rabies. Rabies was a very scary virus. When one was bitten by a dog and was not treated in time and the dog happened to be infected with rabies, the person who was bitten would be infected with the disease. Of course, those who went to the hospital for a rabies vaccine before the disease acted up were usually fine. Once it did, however, there was no one in the world who could be saved, let alone getting a rabies vaccine. Some people did not have a strong immune system and died from the rabies vaccine after being bitten. Moreover, people who were infected with rabies would usually die within a few months. The owner of the villa was bitten when he chased the dog away, so he went to get a rabies vaccine immediately. However, the prevention was not in place and he contracted rabies as well. He died in less than a month. The incident stirred up a storm in Longmen City. Those who heard the news were terrified. Therefore, recently it was popular to close the door after returning home. Therefore, when Yuni came back and saw that the door was not closed, she said, "Don't worry." Suddenly hearing Yunyi's voice and seeing Siyi's hands on her unspeakable parts, Yunjian's face turned red as if it had been dyed with blood. Her face was so red that she couldn't bear to let go. Siyi looked at Yunjian. His eyes were filled with obsession, making it impossible for anyone to ignore his existence. "Xiaojian? Aren't you at home?" At this moment, Yuni had already walked in from the main entrance. Siyi also let go of her hand immediately. It was an exciting game. She was so close to being seen by Yuni. Yunjian's eyes were unbelievably red. Yuni was already at the door. He did not suspect anything when he saw Siyi and Yunjian standing on the stairs. "Xiaojian, why aren't you answering? The door has to be closed in time. There are a lot of stray dogs now and rabies is at its peak," Yuni said. Chapter 878. "I know, go. I'll be more careful next time." Yunjian's voice was soft and carried a sense of tenderness. Of course, this was only Siyi's opinion. Yunjian lowered her gaze as well. Yunjian was good at adjusting her emotions. She recovered quickly and looked at Yuni, saying, "Go, let's go to Officer G's house for dinner today. Mom mentioned it before. Do you know?" Other than the blush on Yunjian's cheeks, she had completely recovered. It was unknown if she had covered it up well or if it was natural. "I know. Mom already called me," Yuni replied and patted his pants pocket, indicating that there was a phone inside. Qin Yiru and Yuni now had the phones Yunjian bought for them. Yuni could contact Qin Yiru normally even if she stayed in school. "I'll put my bag in my room. Let's go over quickly." "Don't let them wait too long," Yuni said and headed upstairs. When they passed by the stairs where Yunjian and Siyi were, Yuni glanced at Yunjian suspiciously before looking at Siyi. Something felt off about the atmosphere. In spite of it, Yunyi did not dwell on it. He bypassed Yunjian and Ce naturally and went to the second floor. It was only when Yunyi went to the second floor that Yunjian breathed a sigh of relief. She then turned to go downstairs, ignoring Ce for the time being. He was getting bolder. It was the same when they went for a barbecue last time. It was the same at home now. If she continued to take it, would he not? Yunjian did not continue thinking about it. She stepped on the stairs and smoothed her clothes gently. Xiao Jian. Watching Yunjian run to the first floor, Ce's starry eyes flashed. In the next second he called out to Yunjian in a gentle and soft voice. Ce admitted that he had never spoken to anyone in such a gentle tone. He would kill anyone who pissed him off. It was definitely not a casual remark. This could be seen from the things that had happened back then. However, he was more patient and attentive to Yunjian than he had ever been. He could treat Yunjian with the most gentle side. Seeing that Yunjian was ignoring him, Ce went downstairs with a smile. Ce's legs were long, so he caught up to Yunjian in a few steps and grabbed Yunjian's wrist. After grabbing Yunjian's wrist, he moved his hand down and interlaced his fingers with Yunjian's. It was then that an awkward cough came from the stairs leading from the first floor to the second floor. Cough, cough, cough. It was obvious that Yunyi had seen Ce's actions from the stairs. Just as Yunyi's cough was heard, Yunyi was already on the first floor. He did not look at Ce and Yunjian but coughed twice before telling Ce, "Brother-in-law, let's go." He was thrilled to be called brother-in-law. So what if Ce was older than him? In the end, he still had to be called brother-in-law by him. Yunyi snickered and pretended to be serious as he walked out of the house. When Ce heard Yunyi call him brother-in-law, he was in a good mood again. Then he held Yunjian's hand and walked out. Gu Yunjian's house and Dong Ruan's house were in different places. However, Gu Yunjian's house and Dong Ruan's house were both villas. Not everyone could afford to live in these villas. However, it was a long journey from Dong Ruan's house to Gu Yunjian's house. Chapter 879. Gu Yunjian also lived in a villa area. The villa area here was much larger than the villa area where Dong Ruan's family lived, and it was surrounded by trees. At a glance, other villas could not be seen. There were also some overall facilities. Compared to Dong Ruan's villa, it was much better. If one had to ask why, it was because the villas here were only sold to people who had made contributions to the country. Perhaps it was an order from the higher-ups, so the land in this area could only be sold to people who had made great contributions to the country. Gu Yunjian was undoubtedly one of the best candidates. In addition, Gu Yunjian's family was very rich. Therefore, it was very reasonable for him to want to buy a villa here. "Are you sure it's here?" Yunyi was shocked when she arrived at the gate. The iron gate in front of her was already as big as the school gate. Looking in from the gate, the villa was filled with flower beds and surrounded by green trees. Looking from the gate, she could not see the villa at all. However, this also reflected that Gu Yunjian's family was extraordinarily big. Perhaps compared to Dong Ruan's family, Gu Yunjian's family was many times bigger. Therefore Yunyi was immediately stunned. Yunjian and Ce had seen villas that were hundreds or thousands of times better than this, so naturally they were not surprised. "Hello, are you young Master Yunyi and Miss Yunjian?" At this moment, an old man sitting in the guardhouse at the gate walked out and asked Yunjian and Yunyi respectfully. This old man had been guarding the gate here for decades. He had been here since Gu Yunjian bought this villa. This old man's surname was Ding. Uncle Ding had been guarding here since Gu Yunjian and his ex-wife got married. Before Yunjian and Yunyi came, Uncle Ding had been instructed by Gu Yunjian not to block Yunjian and Yunyi at the gate when they came over. "We are." Yunyi nodded politely at Uncle Ding. "Then come in." Uncle Ding quickly ran over to open the door. Once the door opened, Yunjian and the other two walked in. There were many flowers and plants in the villa. It took about 5 to 6 minutes to walk from the gate to the villa. "This is it." Yunjian narrowed her eyes. Then she, Ce and Yunyi walked into the house. The gate of the villa was not closed, so Yunjian and the other two were able to walk in easily. Just as they entered, they saw Qin Yiru coming out with 2 plates of dishes. When she saw Yunjian and the others, she could not help greeting them. Xiaojian, Xiaoyi, you're all here. Sit down, it's time to eat." As she spoke, Qin Yiru carried the remaining 2 plates of dishes to the dining table. There was a long dining table in front of them. Xiao Yunju, Ce Lan Su, Adam and Mo Sun were already seated. Even Gu Yunjian was already waiting there. Seeing Yunjian and the others, Adam even moved his lips. They're here. They're finally here. Let's eat." Shuang had already returned to an Hun group. Unlike Adam and Mo Sen, Shui Ying was An Hun's social leader. All of An Hun's missions and external dealings were handled by Shui Ying in place of Ce. Compared to Adam and Mo Sen, Shui Ying did not have much free time. Chapter 880. The group sat down around the long table. The table was rather long but not ridiculously long. It was set up so that one could reach out and take a bite of the food. Even if there were a lot of people, they could still sit down. Right? Xiao Jian said that you got first place in the foreign language competition in high school too? Qin Yiru asked Yun Yi when everyone was seated around the table. Yun Jian had already told Qin Yiru about what happened this Wednesday. The foreign language competition was announced by the school out of the blue, and Yun Yi was a boarding student, so he had just returned home. Therefore it was Yun Jian who told Qin Yiru that Yun Yi had won first place in high school. Hearing that her son and daughter had won first place in the city's foreign language competition in middle school and high school respectively, Qin Yiru was overwhelmed with pride. As their mother, how could Qin Yiru not feel proud? Although she had heard from Yun Jian that Yun Yi had won first place in high school's foreign language competition, Qin Yiru wanted to hear it from her son in person. I got first place in the competition this time, Yun Yi answered when he heard his mother's question. Xiao Jian and Xiao Yi are smart kids indeed. Gu Junjian guffawed, the pride on his face unmistakable. Although Gu Junjian was not Yun Yi and Yun Jian's biological father, both children were actually much closer to Gu Junjian than their biological father, Yun Yi. Gu Junjian was especially nice to Qin Yiru. It's all because of the children's hard work. It's my blessing to have these two children. Qin Yiru chuckled with a hand covering her mouth, but the smile on her face did not diminish. Compared to Qin Yiru and Gu Junjian's friendliness, Adam never stopped talking. This was mainly because Qin Yiru's cooking was too delicious, so Adam didn't even have the time to stop and speak. Is there anyone who eats like you? Your legs have just recovered. If you become crippled, I won't be responsible for helping you. Lan Su was sitting beside Adam. Seeing the way Adam ate, she couldn't help but say something to him. I'm not. My leg still hurts. I got hurt because of you, so you have to support me. When Adam heard that Lan Su wasn't going to support him, he didn't even have the energy to eat the drumstick in his hand. He immediately threw it into the bowl. That aggrieved look made it seem as if Adam was a little wife who had been bullied by Lan Su. Come on, eat your food. You even wanted to fight with me yesterday. Where did that energy go? Mo Sen glared at Adam and blindly spoke the truth. Ha. Adam also laughed awkwardly, looking as if he was a little embarrassed. Chi. At this moment, the sound of several sports cars drifting by suddenly sounded at the door. Someone came in? After all, Uncle Ding was guarding the door, so ordinary people shouldn't be able to come in. However, the sound of these sports cars drifting by and stopping at the front door of the villa was so eye-catching. Who came? I'll go take a look. Gu Junjian frowned slightly. Then he stood up and was about to walk out. Okay. Qin Yiru nodded. The moment Gu Junjian stood up from the dining chair, a group of people suddenly walked in through the door of the villa. The leader was a man in his 20s. The man had dyed his hair red, yellow, blue, and green. His short hair had all kinds of colors. It was obvious that it was dyed. However, if one looked at it directly, they would be able to see that the man in the lead had similar eyebrows to Gu Junjian. Chapter 881. Gu Junjian was slightly stunned when he saw Gu Xian. After hearing Gu Junjian's words, coupled with Gu Junjian's reaction, and the fact that Gu Xian and Gu Junjian looked like they were carved from the same mold, everyone present had an idea of what was going on based on these few points alone. This Gu Xian was most likely the son of Gu Junjian and his ex-wife. Qin Yiru recognized him at first glance. Moreover, Qin Yiru had heard from Gu Junjian that his son with his ex-wife was called Gu Xian. Now that she heard Gu Junjian call the man with dyed red, yellow, blue and green hair, Xiano, she could immediately confirm that he was Gu Junjian's son. Yun Jian could naturally guess as well. However, at this moment Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. The atmosphere became more and more oppressive. At this moment Gu Xian, who was standing there, suddenly let out a cold chuckle. This chuckle, coupled with Gu Xian's hair, gave people the first impression that he was a hooligan that was not to be trifled with. By the time everyone turned to look at Gu Xian, he was already slowly making his way over. Gu Xian not only dyed his hair stylishly, but he also dressed very fashionably. Qin Yiru's heart skipped a beat when she saw his tattered pants and his roguish sneer. Junjian, this is Xian, right? Qin Yiru turned to ask Gu Junjian to ease the awkward atmosphere. Qin Yiru had already changed her way of addressing Gu Junjian. She no longer called him Officer Gu. Qin Yiru simply wanted to use Gu Yunjian's introduction to greet Gu Xian. For Qin Yiru, it was her principle to behave properly. Gu Junjian nodded in tacit agreement. Little Xian, this is yours. Gu Junjian had just finished his sentence when Gu Xian interrupted him. What? You're not happy to see me back, right? You didn't even inform me in advance that you're getting married, did you? Gu Xian's voice was a little strange. It was filled with mockery and ridicule. Gu Junjian did not tell Gu Xian that he was going to get married. That was because Gu Junjian had always known that his divorce with his ex-wife was a huge blow to Gu Xian. That was why Gu Xian chose to study abroad. That was why Gu Xian would rather stay abroad than spend the new year with his biological father. However, Gu Junjian wasn't trying to hide it. On the contrary, Gu Junjian didn't know how to break the news to Gu Xian. Of course, during this period, Gu Junjian had been thinking about how to break the news to Gu Xian that he was going to marry another wife. That was why Gu Junjian kept delaying it. However, on the day of the actual wedding, Gu Junjian would of course inform his own son. However, from Gu Xian's point of view, the meaning of this was very different. When his father divorced his mother, it was done without a word. He didn't care about him at all. When parents divorced, no one was more upset than the child. Regarding this matter, Gu Xian had always held a grudge in his heart. However, what did he see when he came in today? Gu Junjian was happily chatting with his new wife. Did he ever think about his own son? Xian, it's not what you think. Gu Junjian still wanted to say something, but before Gu Junjian could finish his sentence, he was interrupted. Gu Xian shouted at Gu Junjian emotionally, if it's not what I think, then what is it? Gu Junjian, you've been seduced by a vixen, right? You don't even want your own son anymore. As Gu Xian spoke, he pointed at Qin Yiru and shouted at Gu Junjian. Chapter 882. Just as Gu Xian spoke up to this point, a bowl was suddenly slammed onto the table. When the bowl was slammed onto the table, it immediately made a loud noise. Bang! Everyone present was frightened by the loud noise in front of them, and their souls shrank fiercely. Of course, this excluded Ce, Adam, Mo Sen, Lan Su, and Yunyi. As for Gu Xian and the group of people who came in with Gu Xian, they were all shocked. Gu Xian didn't come back alone. He came back with a group of friends. There were about 3 or 4 of Gu Xian's friends, and one of them was a tall and strong foreigner. The others were from country Z. These were all Gu Xian's friends and classmates from his overseas school. When he heard from others that his father was getting married, Gu Xian practically rushed back from abroad with a few of his good buddies. However, just as Gu Xian accused Qin Yiru of marrying him for Gu Yunjian's money, Yunjian slammed the bowl in her hand onto the table with a loud bang. It had to be said that Gu Xian had crossed Yunjian's bottom line. And Yunjian's bottom line was Qin Yiru. If Gu Xian hadn't insulted Qin Yiru, then Yunjian naturally wouldn't have done anything. However, the problem was that Gu Xian had actually accused Qin Yiru of being a woman who got close to Gu Junjian for money. This was something that Yunjian couldn't tolerate. Just as Gu Xian and Gu Xian's friends were stunned by Yunjian's actions, Yunjian's sharp words rang out. I dare you to say that again. Yunjian's words carried a power that made it impossible for people not to be afraid, but at least Gu Xian and Gu Xian's friends were shocked. After coming back to his senses, Gu Xian looked at Yunjian, who stood up from the dining chair. He pretended to be bold and looked back at Yunjian. Gu Xian gritted his teeth. He immediately looked at Yunjian with an imposing manner and replied, Who are you? What does my family's business have to do with you? Gu Xian hadn't been obedient all these years. Gu Yunjian's divorce with his ex-wife was a huge blow to him, so Gu Xian had been living a leisurely life abroad these years. In his free time, he had befriended a group of hooligan-like buddies. Therefore, Gu Xian's tone was a little boastful. I'm not anyone. Your family's future has nothing to do with me, and I'm not interested in your family's future at all, Yunjian said. Yunjian paused. Then her eyes suddenly became sharp, and those sharp eyes carried an irresistible courage. But the person you insulted just now is my mother. I don't care about your family's business, but if you insult my mother, then I won't allow it. Yunjian said word by word. Her words carried an irresistible authority. Even Gu Junjian wanted to speak up for Yunjian. Others might not know, but how could Gu Junjian not know? Not only did Yunjian have several identities now, more importantly, she was the boss of the internationally renowned Kosha mercenaries. How could the boss of Kosha mercenaries, the mother of slaying God, the world's top secret agent, be someone who lacked money? Who knows if it's an insult or not? Maybe your mom got close to my dad for money? Gu Xian hated Gu Junjian now, so he did not have a good opinion of Yun Jian and Qin Yiru. Xian, don't spout nonsense. Xiao Jian is your younger sister from now on. Gu Junjian could not help growling at his son. Chapter 883. However, Gu Junjian did not yell at Gu Xian because in Gu Junjian's opinion, he had already let his son down. Gu Junjian himself admitted that he had been busy with military affairs and had paid little attention to his family. Gu Junjian's ex-wife had run away with another man and divorced him because of this. It was also because of this that Gu Xian deeply hated his biological father, Gu Junjian. Therefore, when Gu Xian wanted to study abroad, and when Gu Xian wanted to do a series of things including making a group of bad friends, Gu Junjian did not participate too much. This was because Gu Junjian felt that he had let Gu Xian down. Even when they were young, Gu Junjian had always listened to Gu Xian and had never insulted him. If it were not for Gu Xian's outrageous words, Gu Junjian would not have spoken to Gu Xian in such a tone. All these years his father had never insulted him, but because of Qin Yiru he had insulted him. Gu Xian looked at him in disbelief. You've changed? You never said that to me before. Gu Xian looked at Gu Junjian with hatred. He was not even willing to call him Dad. To Gu Xian, Gu Junjian had never cared about his family before. After his mother cheated on him, Gu Junjian divorced his biological mother without saying a word. Since he was young, he had been more miserable than others. Therefore, Gu Xian felt that he should enjoy Gu Junjian's apology. He should make Gu Junjian regret it. In fact, there were many people who had the same idea as Gu Xian. Gu Xian had turned himself into a hooligan, or perhaps it was because he had fallen from grace. In fact, he had only done this for one thing. He wanted Gu Junjian to regret it. He wanted Gu Junjian to see what he had done in the past. He wanted his son to become the kind of person he should not be. Gu Xian had become like this because of Gu Junjian. Haha, as expected, it's just like what others say. When a mistress enters the family, everything is decided by the mistress. I won't acknowledge such a shameless vixen. I don't have a sister. My parents only gave birth to me. Gu Xian roared at Gu Junjian. His eyes were filled with hatred. Shut up. After Gu Xian roared, Gu Junjian did not wait for Yun Jian to make a move. He grabbed the bowl in his hand and threw it at Gu Xian. This was the first time Gu Junjian had been so angry and hit Gu Xian. Gu Xian's words completely enraged Gu Junjian. Gu Xian called Qin Yiru a vixen. To be honest, Gu Junjian could not hold it in anymore. Qin Yiru was the person Gu Junjian had decided on. In other words, Gu Junjian had already decided that Qin Yiru would be the person who would share the joys and sorrows of his life with him. Therefore, even his son, who he had always tolerated, would not allow him to insult her like this. Ping 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 pang pang. The bowl was thrown at Gu Xian in an arc Gu Xian did not dodge. He watched as Gu Junjian threw the bowl at him, and finally the rice in the bowl was thrown at him. The person who was smashed was stunned for a moment. He had always thought that his father, Gu Junjian, would tolerate him in the future because of his guilt. However, ever since he walked into the house and saw Gu Junjian chatting and eating with Qin Yiru and the others, Gu Xian felt that he no longer belonged to this family. He felt that he was very pitiful and miserable. Gu Junjian, you will regret this. Gu Xian glared at Gu Junjian fiercely. After he finished speaking, he ran out without even looking at his friends. Chapter 884. In that situation, Gu Xian's friends didn't say anything. After all, it was their family matter. However, when they saw Gu Xian rush out without looking back, Gu Xian's friends also ran out. It wasn't easy for the child to come back. Even if he said something unpleasant, you shouldn't treat him like this. The child is still young. Some things can be discussed slowly. Qin Yiru's hands were tightly clasped together. She stood up hesitantly and spoke to Gu Junjian. Qin Yiru was very kind. Even if Gu Xian had insulted her and called her a vixen, Qin Yiru wasn't angry. Of course, Qin Yiru wasn't the kind of person who liked to be bullied. However, she understood how big of a blow a child's parents' divorce was. Back then, Qin Yiru didn't want to divorce Yun Gang because she was afraid that Yun Jian and Yun Yi wouldn't be able to accept it. If one were to ask Qin Yiru why she understood this kind of rebellious mentality, it was because Dong Ruan's parents had divorced long ago. Dong Ruan often complained to her about this. When Dong Ruan's parents divorced, it was a big blow to Dong Ruan and Si Yi's mother. Especially Dong Ruan. She studied so hard when she was young because she wanted to be strong. However, Qin Yiru knew that Dong Ruan's parents' divorce was no different from the sky falling down on her. Especially after Dong Ruan's parents reorganized their families, Dong Ruan became an outsider in that family. Although Dong Ruan's parents were rich and Dong Ruan had never lacked financial love, to Dong Ruan without family love, it was as if she had lost everything in life. Qin Yiru didn't want Yun Jian and Yun Yi to become like that, so she didn't divorce Yun Gang. However, since Yun Jian and Yun Yi didn't think that way and Yun Gang cheated, Qin Yiru decided to go all out and divorce Yun Gang. I'll go check on him. Qin Yiru was overflowing with maternal love. She was a kind person, so when she saw Gu Xian running out, she stood up and chased after him. Gu Junjian held his forehead with his hand, a look of despair and pain on his face. It was not that Gu Junjian did not expect Gu Xian to hate him, but what could he do? What could he do? Seeing Qin Yiru run out, Yun Jian was worried that she would be bullied by Gu Xian. Therefore Yun Jian also stood up. She said to the few people present and then followed Qin Yiru out. I'll go take a look too. After Yun Jian finished speaking, she left the dining chair and walked out of the door. Yun Jian knew that it would be very awkward for Gu Junjian to go out in this situation, especially when Gu Xian was still angry. However, if Qin Yiru went out alone, Yun Jian was afraid that Qin Yiru would be bullied. Just as Yun Jian stood up, Si stood up at the same time. He did not say anything and followed Yun Jian out of the door. On the other side, Gu Xian simply rushed out of the door. Unknowingly, it had started to drizzle outside the door. Gu Xian plunged into the rain, but he did not feel cold or chilly at all. He had been waiting for his mother to come back to reconcile with his father, and for the family to be reunited. However, all of this was shattered. When he saw Gu Junjian happily with Qin Yiru and the others, he suddenly felt that he could not fit in with this family. Was his existence superfluous? Xian. A few of Gu Xian's friends rushed out and grabbed Gu Xian. At that moment, Gu Xian was on the verge of collapse. He looked like a dying man on the brink of death. Chapter 885. Xian, it's not easy for you to come home. Don't be angry with your father. Come home with me, okay? Qin Yiru said gently as she walked over. As she spoke, Qin Yiru even reached out to help Gu Xian. However, Gu Xian saw Qin Yiru's hand coming towards him from the corner of his eye, and his heart was filled with hatred. Get lost. Hypocrite, who allowed you to call me Xian? Disgusting, don't touch me. As Gu Xian spoke, he reached out and slapped away Qin Yiru's hand that was reaching towards Gu Xian. Qin Yiru sincerely reached out to help Gu Xian, but who knew that when Gu Xian slapped her, Qin Yiru would take 2 steps back. It took her a long time to stabilize her feet, but because her left foot accidentally twisted, she fell into a puddle. Ah! Qin Yiru shrieked before her feet gave way and she fell into a puddle that was filled by the drizzle. You vixen! Who told you to be hypocritical and bully Xian? Go to hell. A guy standing next to Gu Xian saw Qin Yiru fall into the puddle, so he directly walked over and lifted his foot. It looked like he was going to kick Qin Yiru. This guy from Gu Xian was dressed like a rich man, and the arrogance on his face could not be described with words. Arrogant, conceited, these were all enough to describe this guy. Xinjie, stop. Seeing that his friend was about to step on Qin Yiru for him, Gu Xian looked at Qin Yiru, who fell to the ground, and looked at Qin Yiru's face that was slightly old due to overwork, and he unconsciously shouted. However, Gu Xian's friend did not listen to Gu Xian's words, and this guy called Xinjie still stepped on Qin Yiru. F***CKU mistress bitch? Go to hell bitch. Xinjie did not listen to his advice, and when Gu Xian reached out to stop him, Xinjie's foot had already landed on Qin Yiru's body. Qin Yiru had already accidentally fallen into the puddle, and now she was still angry after being kicked by Xinjie. At this time, Yun Jian just happened to see this scene from the door, and she did not expect to see this scene at all. When she saw Xinjie kick Qin Yiru's abdomen, Yun Jian growled, "Mom!" and immediately rushed towards Qin Yiru. Gu Junjian, who was sitting in the room, was still holding his head with an embarrassed expression. At this time he suddenly heard Yun Jian's growl and he suddenly stood up. What happened? What happened? Gu Junjian said as he stood up from the table and he rushed towards the door. Gu Junjian believed in his son, Gu Xian's character. Although Gu Xian's words were unpleasant, he would not do such a crazy thing. Gu Junjian quickly thought of Gu Xian's brothers. Could it be? On this side, Xinjie kicked Qin Yiru's abdomen fiercely. Xinjie wanted to lift his leg to kick Qin Yiru again, but he was stopped by Gu Xian. F***CK Gu Xian, what are you doing? Why do you care about this mistress? You might as well kill her directly. I'm trying to help you. Xinjie said confidently. Gu Xian did not know why, but when he looked at Qin Yiru's face, which was obviously overworked and slightly old, his heart tightened. What the hell, he actually pitied this mistress who was about to steal his father away. However, Guxian could not help but take 2 steps towards Qin Yiru. Chapter 886. Qin Yiru was already old, and after being kicked by Xinjie she was a little dizzy. Because of overwork these years, Qin Yiru's body had some sequelae. However, Xinjie didn't care about this. For a rich young master like him, he could kick whoever he wanted and he never cared about it. And now, Xinjie watched as Guxian extended his hand to help Qin Yiru up. He stood behind Guxian and laughed wildly and even mocked Guxian. Guxian, are you stupid? That's a mistress. She wants to marry your dad and take away your dad's love, and you actually went to help her. I helped you kick her twice and that's already letting her off easy you. At this time, Guxian had already helped Qin Yiru up. However, at the same time Xinjie, who was laughing wildly behind Guxian and mocking Guxian for helping Qin Yiru up, suddenly felt a gust of wind coming from behind him. In the next second he felt as if someone had kicked him hard in the waist. By the time Xinjie reacted, the heavy kick had already landed on his waist. Being kicked in the waist from behind, Xinjie instinctively wanted to stand firm. However, the powerful force behind the kick sent Xinjie crashing to the ground. Guxian was supporting Qin Yiru, and Xinjie had his back facing them. Only the other 2 buddies of Guxian were watching from the side. However, at this moment they saw a horrifying scene. They saw Yunjian madly rushing towards them. She lifted her legs, and those long legs seemed to have a huge amount of magic, running towards them at the speed of an arrow. Then, at the moment when she was close to Xinjie, Yunjian suddenly jumped on the ground with her right foot. She used the momentum of her right foot to sweep her body at a 90 degrees angle. At the last second when she was close to Xinjie, she switched from her right foot to her left foot. Her left foot suddenly stretched out, and with a charge Yunjian's left foot fiercely kicked Xinjie, whose back was facing her. Xinjie was kicked almost at the same time. His whole body trembled as he took 2 steps forward. His legs went soft and Xinjie actually knelt down with his face facing down. With this kneeling, Xinjie's upper body couldn't support himself, and he also fell to the ground like a frog. However, in front of Xinjie was a bumpy cement ground. Because of the rain, the bumpy cement ground was filled with a large amount of muddy cement. As for Xinjie, he directly crashed into the cement pit with his face down. However, Xinjie quickly reacted. In any case, Xinjie was also a young master who practiced Taekwondo and Sanda. When he reacted, he quickly stood up. Yunjian suddenly lifted her leg and with a horizontal kick Xinjie was once again kicked into the cement ground. But this time Xinjie's face was facing the sky. But because of the previous kick, Xinjie's entire face was now covered with muddy cement. He couldn't even open his eyes. However, just as Xinjie was about to get up again, Yunjian's pair of jade feet fiercely stepped on Xinjie's abdomen. Not only that, after Yunjian stretched out her foot to step on Xinjie's abdomen, she also heavily shifted her foot twice. Xinjie felt that his internal organs in his abdomen were about to be shattered by Yunjian's kick. He couldn't open his eyes and could only let out a scream. Chapter 887. Xinjie could only hear Yunjian's arrogant words that could not be ignored. Because his entire face was soaked in the muddy water, Xinjie could not open his eyes. He could only hear Yunjian's crisp and arrogant words lingering in his ears. However, Xinjie could feel that the foot on his abdomen was as heavy as 1,000 pounds. It was so oppressive that he could not even breathe. Let go. Xinjie was suppressed by the intense pain and did not pay attention to Yunjian's words. As he spoke, he reached out to grab the foot that was stepping on his abdomen. However, the moment Xinjie reached out his hand, Yunjian lifted her foot slightly. The moment Xinjie was about to grab her foot, she lifted her leg slightly to the side and avoided Xinjie's grab. Just as Xinjie heaved a sigh of relief and was about to stand up, Yunjian's foot once again stepped on Xinjie's abdomen. Xinjie could not help but let out a painful howl. Who was it? Who was so daring to step on him again and again? Xinjie was the son of a rich family. He had never been treated like this before. Therefore, he immediately roared with hatred, "What are you doing? F***ck, come and help me. Guxian, I was helping you beat up the mistress just now." The word mistress made Yunjian furious. Gu Junjian had already divorced his ex-wife. Therefore, no matter legally or morally, Gu Junjian was still single. Qin Yiru had also divorced Yun Gang. If the two of them were to be together, it would be perfectly justifiable. There was no such thing as a mistress. Moreover, if Gu Junjian was not single, Qin Yiru would not agree to be together with him. Therefore, when Xinjie once again insulted Qin Yiru as a mistress, Yunjian once again lifted her foot and kicked down. Shenjie was kicked by Yunjian and his whole body sank deeper into the cement ground. At this moment, Gu Junjian had already rushed over. What's wrong? What just happened? When Gu Junjian saw Gu Xian helping Qin Yiru up, he immediately rushed over to help Gu Xian hold Qin Yiru's hand. Qin Yiru took a long time to react. I'm fine. Qin Yiru slowly regained her senses. After she regained her consciousness, she did not even think of complaining to Gu Junjian about Gu Xian. At this time, Shenjie's insults came again. F***ck, what are you doing? Hurry up and drag this damned woman out for lousy. Damn it. Yunjian stepped on Shenjie's abdomen. At this moment, Shenjie was as miserable as he could be. However, looking at Yunjian's horrifying appearance, Gu Xian's other 2 or 3 friends did not dare to go up and pull Yunjian to help Shenjie get out of this predicament. Gu Xian, on the other hand, ran over after helping Qin Yiru up. Then he looked at Yunjian, paused for a moment and shouted, "Stop fighting." Gu Xian's shout was met with a cold snort from Yunjian. You think we should stop fighting just because you say so? Who do you think you are? Yunjian asked out of the blue. However, just as she finished speaking, Yunjian raised her foot and kicked Gu Xian's abdomen fiercely again. Does it feel good? That's how you kicked my mother just now. Yunjian's gloomy voice sounded. Her words were mixed with a sneer that could not be ignored. Shenjie was a person who cared a lot about his reputation. At this moment he was kicked by a girl and struggled desperately to no avail. This was extremely embarrassing for Shenjie. F***ck off. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. Shenjie shouted in disdain. Ce, who was standing at the side, heard this and was about to make a move, but Yunjian had already made her move. She took out a butterfly knife from her pocket and stabbed it into the soil next to Shenjie's cheek. When Shenjie's face moved, he felt that if he had turned his head to the side, the butterfly knife would have pierced his head. Suddenly his whole body trembled. Chapter 888. As long as Shenjie moved his cheek to the left, he would be able to feel the cold butterfly knife sticking to his face. He trembled and his whole body went soft. Shenjie was born into a wealthy family. Even in the whole of country Z, the Shen family was considered one of the top aristocratic families. Kicking Qin Yiru like he did just now was something that Shenjie often did. For a rich man like Shenjie, he usually dressed like a ruffian and looked down on ordinary people because of his prominent family background. Therefore, people like Shenjie would usually bully the nannies in his family. Punching and kicking were common. However, because the Shen family offered a high salary, the nannies were not willing to leave. This was also a fact. The evil behavior that he developed when he was young caused Shenjie to start hitting Qin Yiru when he had the chance. Moreover, fighting with people in school was also a common thing for Shenjie. Even so, Shenjie had never been threatened by a woman who stepped on the ground. What was more frightening was that this woman really dared to use a knife. She wanted to kill him? Shenjie was a rich man's son. Although he would usually get injured when he fought with others, he had never experienced the despair of walking on the edge of death. Of course, perhaps in Shenjie's opinion, getting injured in a fight was a very cool thing. Just as Shenjie was thinking about this, Yunjian's frivolous voice sounded again, "You can die now." After speaking, Shenjie felt the butterfly knife that was stuck to his face being pulled out from the ground by Yunjian. Shenjie's face was covered in mud, even his eyes were stained with mud. Therefore he could only feel Yunjian's actions. However, when he heard Yunjian's voice, Shenjie's heart jumped wildly. She was not joking. She was serious. At this moment, Shenjie could feel that Yunjian was holding the butterfly knife above his head and was about to chop it down on his head. No. I was wrong. I shouldn't have done this. I was wrong. Shenjie's voice trembled as he begged for mercy, his arrogance completely washed away. The arrogant Shenjie just now had become like this. Yunjian merely scoffed. "Xiaojian, don't." Just as Yunjian's knife was about to land on Shenjie's face, Qin Yiru's shout rang out. Yunjian retracted the knife in time. Yunjian had never thought of killing Shenjie. Moreover, Yunjian was an advanced special forces soldier now, but they could not kill people recklessly like this. If that was the case, there would be no law in this world. Yunjian wanted to teach Shenjie a lesson. At the very least, it had to be the kind of lesson where they wouldn't dare to be arrogant anymore. Before Yunjian made a move, Qin Yiru's voice rang. "Xiaojian, don't do this. Put the knife away. You're part of the military now, don't tarnish the military's reputation." Qin Yiru panicked when she saw Yunjian pointing the knife at Shenjie. so she went over to snatch the butterfly knife from Yunjian's hand and pulled Yunjian to the side. Xinjie breathed a sigh of relief when Yunjian was pulled away. The foot that exerted gravity on his stomach disappeared. Xinjie seemed to have been reborn. He lay on the ground and took a few deep breaths. As Qin Yiru pulled Yunjian away, Gu Xian heard a few thunderous words. Gu Xian turned to Gu Junjian immediately. "Dad, she's from the military?" he asked unwillingly. Chapter 889. Gu Xian's words sent chills down Xinjie's spine, who was lying lifelessly on the floor, as well as Gu Xian's other two buddies. Yunjian was from the military? While Gu Xian and his men were still in shock at Qin Yiru's words, Qin Yiru had already pulled Yunjian to the side. "Xiao Jian, I'm fine. I'm still strong. It's okay, it's okay." Xinjie had kicked her hard just now and it was painful, but Qin Yiru still bore the pain and consoled Yunjian. Qin Yiru was behaving this way partly because Xinjie was Gu Xian's buddy after all. Gu Xian was quite a pitiful child, and it was apparent from what happened just now that Gu Xian was not a bad person. When Xinjie kicked her just now, he even stood up to stop it. Qin Yiru did not like people like Xinjie. People like him were practically thugs. He was the kind of person that people would say, whoever hung out with him would be led astray. Gu Xian hung out with these buddies purely because he wanted to be noticed by Gu Junjian so that Gu Junjian could fulfill his responsibility as a father. In spite of it, Gu Junjian seemed to have gotten the wrong idea. He felt that he had let Gu Xian down, so he ignored Gu Xian even more after that. As a result, Gu Xian became more and more depraved and had befriended a bunch of gangsters now. Even when he was overseas, he got into fights every day. The group of people he befriended was no different from Xinjie's group. They were people who would even beat up women and children. The other main reason was that if Yunjian killed Xinjie because of this, she would not be able to avoid jail time even if Yunjian was a member of the Advanced Special Forces. Qin Yiru's proudest thing was to have Yunjian and Yunyi as her children. How could she possibly watch Yunjian do something foolish? In spite of it, Qin Yiru did not know that Yunjian did not want to kill Xinjie just now. She only wanted to intimidate him. Of course, that was enough to scare Xinjie half to death from Yunjian. Qin Yiru's persuasion was effective on Yunjian as Yunjian calmed down right away. "Mom, you don't have to do this." A murderous look flashed across Yunjian's cold eyes as she looked at Qin Yiru. She then paused and looked at Xinjie, who was lying on the ground. "My mom forgave you today, so I won't pursue the matter. If you dare to lay a hand on my mom again, even the Jade Emperor won't be able to stop you from meeting the King of Hell." After Yunjian finished speaking, she turned and helped Qin Yiru into the house. As they walked, Yunjian asked, "Mom, does it hurt? Come in quickly, I'll take a look." After Yunjian left, Yi did not. His tall figure was even more conspicuous than the others present. Especially his handsome face and the murderous look on his face, everyone felt that he was handsome no matter how they looked at him. Xinjie had already been helped up by the two brothers who were too stunned to help. Gu Xian and Gu Junjian were still standing in the same spot. Being supported by Yunjian, Qin Yiru finally felt the pain coming from her waist. Xinjie had kicked her there and she felt that her body was about to fall apart. However, after taking 2 steps, Qin Yiru turned around. She looked at the few people who were still standing in the rain and urged, "Hurry up and go into the house. It's still raining. Nothing is more important than your health." After Qin Yiru finished speaking, she was helped into the house by Yunjian. After hearing Qin Yiru's words, Gu Xian knew that Qin Yiru's words were meant for him. Was she concerned about him? Chapter 890. Gu Xian had never experienced a mother's love before. After Gu Xian's mother gave birth to Gu Xian, she left Gu Xian at home and went out to meet people dressed to the nines. Even so, Gu Xian did not resent his birth mother. There was no other reason other than the fact that she was his birth mother. No matter how badly she treated him, he could only accept it. Ever since Gu Junjian divorced his birth mother, Gu Xian was disheartened by them, but Gu Xian still held on to a tiny bit of illusion. What if his parents remarried one day? Then, like other parents, they would pamper and spoil their children, even if they were not pampered or spoiled, no matter how hard their days were. As long as they cared for him a little, that would be enough. In spite of it, Gu Xian actually felt a hint of kinship from this woman who was about to become his stepmother. Was he hallucinating? Even his birth parents had never given him any kinship. How could he feel kinship from someone else? Xian, stop fooling around. Your auntie is a kind person. She's not like what you said. That was Xiao Jian just now. Since you asked, I won't hide it from you. Xiao Jian is part of my military. Gu Junjian did not plan to hide this from his son. In spite of it, after Gu Junjian said that Yun Jian was part of his military, Gu Xian's indignant groan rang again. What did you say? She's really part of your military? As he spoke, Gu Xian's indignant voice rang again. You actually let her join your army? I wanted to join your military back then, but you didn't allow it. You even said that I wasn't capable enough. What about now? Have you really been bewitched? You're letting a little girl like her join the military. You didn't even want me to join back then. Gu Xian raised his voice. Gu Xian also had the heart to protect his country. When he was young, he took Gu Junjian as his role model. Ever since he was young, he wanted to be a soldier, but Gu Junjian did not give him the chance. Gu Junjian was the leader of the advanced special forces. At the same time, he also had the authority to recruit outstanding youths from all over the country. Gu Xian wanted to join the advanced special forces and become a member, but Gu Junjian did not give him the chance. Therefore, when Gu Xian found out that Yun Jian had joined the military, he was furious. Although Yun Jian was so fierce just now, Gu Xian didn't think that Yun Jian was that capable. In other words, Gu Xian himself was a martial artist. He knew that Yun Jian had some skills, but he would not admit that Yun Jian was better than him. Under such circumstances, how could Gu Xian not think about it? Why would his father rather let Yun Jian join the advanced special forces than let him join? If this wasn't favoritism, then what was? Shut up. Xian, what do you know? Gu Junjian gritted his teeth in anger. He wanted to tell him everything, but the words that were about to leave his mouth were stopped. Isn't that so? If you weren't bewitched, why would you let her join the advanced special forces? Gu Xian raised his voice again. At this time, Xinjie was already being helped up. What? You want to know why, right? Gu Junjian couldn't hold it in anymore and cried out in pain. Because she's better than you. She's stronger than you, whether it's strength or ability, she's better than you. Although Gu Junjian didn't want to belittle his own son, he had to admit it. Chapter 891. It was rare for Gu Xian to hear his father use such words against him. Most importantly, he had never heard his father praise someone in such a tone before. It could be said that in Gu Xian's mind, his father was someone who would never praise others. Therefore Gu Xian was very surprised. Forget it, forget it. There's no point in talking about this anymore. Let's go home. Gu Junjian had a headache from arguing with Gu Xian. He reached out and touched his forehead, brushed his short hair and said to Gu Xian. Gu Xian was not convinced, but Gu Junjian had already said so. Moreover, he was no longer a child. He had been Gu Junjian's father for so many years. How could he not understand Gu Junjian? Gu Junjian never turned back once he did something. Knowing this, Gu Xian did not intend to continue arguing. Bang! Just as Gu Xian had calmed down and was about to go home with Gu Junjian, he heard the sound of a heavy object being slammed to the ground. Gu Xian and Gu Junjian both turned to look at the same time. Xinjie, who had just stood up and wiped the cement on his face with a napkin and had just regained his sight, was kicked to the ground again by Ce with a hard kick, causing a loud thud to resound in the air. Ce's kick sent Xinjie flying, the bones in his body crackling. Xinjie did not expect that Ce did not follow Yun Jian back to the house to teach him a lesson. At this moment, Xinjie had been kicked to the ground. He did not even have time to react. However, the bones in his body were still making cracking sounds. In the next second, Xinjie's painful howl resounded through the sky. Ah! My leg. Ah! The cracking of bones was enough to prove that the bones in Xinjie's leg were broken. Ce had broken his leg with a single kick. Everyone present was shocked by Ce's ferocious actions. Especially Gu Xian and Gu Junjian. She had just seen Ce standing beside Yun Jian without saying a word. What happened in the end? Just as Yun Jian helped Qin Yiru into the house, Ce was even more ruthless than Yun Jian. He kicked Xinjie's foot so hard that the bones in his foot were broken. The sound of bones cracking could be heard. Just as everyone present was looking at Ce in shock, they saw Ce raise his long legs and walk unsteadily toward Xinjie, who had been kicked to the ground and was hugging his leg as he howled in pain. Yo, what are you doing? Gu Xian and Xinjie's other two friends saw Ce walking towards them. The moment they thought of Ce's actions, they felt their hair stand on end. Now that Ce was walking towards them, they retreated in fear. Ce didn't say a word. He walked straight to Xinjie and bent down slightly. He reached out his bony hand and grabbed Xinjie's collar. With this grab, Ce actually pulled Xinjie up from the ground. Ah! What are you doing? Xinjie was sweating profusely after a few seconds of pain. He stared at Ce as if he was looking at a ferocious beast. How dare you touch my mother-in-law? Do you think I'll let you off? A murderous look flashed across Si Yi's sharp eyes. He curved his handsome face and curved his lips. There was an undeniable ruthlessness on his face. Xinjie was in so much pain that his entire body was trembling. His abdomen, which had been kicked by Yun Jian, was still hurting. He wasn't joking. Right now, Si was like a king who looked down on all living beings. His tall posture and his flamboyant words did not feel out of place at all. Chapter 892. Xinjie didn't expect Si Yi to be so calculative. In the past, Xinjie was always the one who bullied others, and there was no reason for others to bully him. Moreover, people like Xinjie liked to form cliques. When they were studying abroad, they formed a gang, and it was equivalent to the kind of gang that was formed to fight with others. Therefore, under such circumstances, Xinjie felt that he had a lot of face. Therefore, when he kicked Qin Yiru, his foppish character was revealed. When he kicked Qin Yiru, he used all his strength. However, Xinjie didn't expect that Si Yi would actually attack him. Moreover, he was so ruthless that he didn't even have a chance to fight back. Under Si Yi's pressure, Xinjie had no choice but to lower his head. He was so scared that his whole body was trembling. Then he said, "I was wrong. I can apologize." Xinjie felt that his legs were about to be crippled. He had never met people like Si Yi and Yun Jian. The former had just beaten him up, and Qin Yiru had stopped her from killing him. However, the latter had broken his bones with one kick. He had only kicked Qin Yiru a few times. If Xinjie had known that this would happen, he probably wouldn't have attacked Qin Yiru. Frankly speaking, he wouldn't have dared to do it even if he was beaten to death. However, this time, Si Yi didn't care about Xinjie. In front of Gu Xian and Gu Junjian, he grabbed Xinjie's collar and kicked Xinjie's abdomen fiercely. This was enough to break all the bones in Xinjie's body. Xinjie howled as he was sent flying. After he landed heavily, he lay on the ground in the distance and didn't make any more noise. He wasn't dead, he just fainted. Xinjie. Gu Xian and Xinjie's other two friends saw this and rushed over in fright. *CK. Gu Xian cursed. Then he ran over as well. After Si Yi kicked Xinjie, he wasn't worried about Xinjie's life at all. Instead, he walked into the house. His tall figure walked in the drizzle and soon disappeared in front of everyone. In any case, Xinjie was his brother, so Gu Xian and two other people helped Xinjie to the hospital. Gu Junjian didn't follow him. After giving Gu Xian some instructions, Gu Junjian returned to his room. Hence, Gu Xian drove the unconscious Xinjie to a nearby hospital. The gathering at Gu Junjian's house this time was very unpleasant because of Gu Xian's return. Therefore no one ate much at dinner. Of course except for Adam, Mo Sin and a few others. At night, Yun Jian and the others returned to Dong Ruan's villa. The next day, when Yun Jian woke up and came back from her morning run, Qin Yiru had already gone to Gu Junjian's house to prepare breakfast for Gu Xian. Gu Junjian had gone to the army. Qin Yiru was a kind person. She was afraid that Gu Xian wouldn't eat breakfast alone at home, so she hurried over to prepare breakfast for Gu Xian. Yun Jian was afraid that Gu Xian or his friends would cause trouble again, so Yun Jian took 2 pieces of bread that Qin Yiru had prepared for her and walked towards Gu Junjian's house as if she was taking a stroll. At the entrance of Gu Junjian's house, Yun Jian met Gu Xian, who had just come out of the villa. The moment Gu Xian saw Yun Jian, he snorted coldly and wanted to walk around Yun Jian. "Stop." Yun Jian didn't turn around to look at Gu Xian. She just snorted softly. Hearing Yun Jian's snort, Gu Xian just snorted and wanted to walk around Yun Jian. "How about a race? As a racing enthusiast, you should be very interested in racing. If I can beat you, you're not allowed to be so rude to my mother in the future," Yun Jian said when she saw Gu Xian walk around her. She wasn't angry. Yun Jian's words really stunned Gu Xian. Chapter 893. Gu Xian's face was full of surprise. Racing was a symbol of wildness. At the same time, in foreign countries, especially in Gu Xian's school, men who could race and drive well would be regarded as extremely manly and charming by girls. Like the wind, Gu Xian and several of his buddies also became obsessed with racing. During his school days, Gu Xian was extremely obsessed with racing. Could be said that he was obsessed with it to a whole new level. Racing itself was exciting and dangerous. Perhaps in the beginning, Gu Xian and the others followed the trend to learn how to race. But it was undeniable that Gu Xian and the others were indeed obsessed with racing later. However, his interest in racing was not even mentioned to his own father, Gu Junjian. How did Yun Jian know? Gu Xian originally intended to ignore Yun Jian, but when he heard Yun Jian's words he was stunned on the spot, so he hurriedly turned around and asked. Yun Jian slowly crossed her arms in front of her chest. She appeared relaxed but did not speak immediately. Just when Gu Xian thought that Yun Jian would not speak, Yun Jian's voice suddenly sounded, "Your sports car has been modified, right?" Yun Jian's words were not a question, but an affirmative tone. It was only then that Gu Xian turned back to look at his sports car that was parked not too far away at Yun Jian's words. Then he looked at Yun Jian in a daze and nodded, "Yes." After being stunned, Gu Xian was puzzled again. "How do you know that my sports car has been modified? And you didn't get close to my sports car to observe how?" Gu Xian had just finished asking when he was interrupted by Yun Jian. "I accidentally saw it last night. Anyone with a discerning eye can tell at a glance that it has been modified." Yun Jian paused for a beat before she continued, "You're right. Why would a normal person think of modifying a sports car? What's more, I saw a lot of scratches on your sports car. Unless you are a racing enthusiast, unless it is a sports car, how could it be modified like this by you?" Yun Jian's explanation made Gu Xian speechless. But it turned out that Yun Jian's words were all reasonable. Ahem. Gu Xian coughed softly. He obviously did not expect his stepmother's daughter to be able to see this. Could it be that a girl like her also liked racing? Ahem, you are a girl, do you also like to study these things? Gu Xian was suddenly interested in Yun Jian. He changed his attitude of ignoring Yun Jian and immediately asked Yun Jian. Of course, he was only interested in this kind of curiosity towards his sister at most. However, Gu Xian did not notice the change in his mentality at all. However, Gu Xian still did not believe that Yun Jian knew how to drive a race car. After all, Yun Jian was still underage. At 16 years old, she was still considered a minor in Z country and could not get a driver's license. How could she start school without a driver's license? Unless she was a genius. Otherwise, who would have the ability to do so? Yun Jian saw that Gu Xian did not believe her, but she was not angry. She put down her arms and reached out with her left hand to lift her high ponytail that fell on her chest. Yun Jian's way of lifting her hair was different from a little girl's. Her arrogant look made even Gu Xian's eyes pop out of their sockets. But Gu Xian's eyes simply lit up. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.